Chapter 87. Chu Yi frowned and looked at Tan Xiao again. He then shrugged and said, "You're also called Tan Xiao? It seems that this name is quite popular. There are many people with the same name. Forget it. I'll give him a chance based on your name. See you at the Paradise Club tomorrow." "See you there." Afraid that the other party would be overjoyed, Jia Ruidao shouted before Tan Xiao could open his mouth. Chu Yi snorted indifferently and walked toward the everlasting feast hall. Chen Kai, who was following behind Chu Yi, made a throat-slitting gesture to Jia Ruidao and left triumphantly. 10 minutes later, in a private room on the second floor of the everlasting feast hall, the restaurant manager walked in with a bottle of wine. His eyes swept over the dozens of people in the room and finally stopped on Chen Kai. He then said with a smile, "Young Master Chen, you rarely come to our everlasting feast hall recently. Is there anything we didn't treat you well and made you unhappy?" Chen Kai waved his hand and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I've been fishing recently, and I even caught a big fish, so I didn't have time to come here. As a matter of fact, 2 esteemed guests from the imperial capital have arrived, so I brought them here. Brother Chu, Brother Bai, let me introduce you. This is the manager of this restaurant. He usually manages the business of the entire restaurant." Chu Yi and Bai Tao glanced at each other. Both of them were smart and slick people. They had been in the business world for several years and were very experienced. They instantly understood that the person who could be personally introduced by Chen Kai, even if it was just the manager of a restaurant, was probably not an ordinary person. Immediately, both of them nodded to the restaurant manager. The restaurant manager said with a smile, "Welcome to the 2 distinguished guests. No wonder there are so many happy events today. It's just a pity you came too late to see the big show tonight. If you want to see it later, I'm afraid it'll be hard to wait for a year and a half." "What big show?" Chen Kai asked with a confused expression. The restaurant manager said, "Young Master Chen, you're a frequent guest here. You should know about the 1,000 Revolution Array in our everlasting feast hall, right? Tonight, a few hours ago, 3 experts tried to break through the 1,000 Revolution Array. 2 of them successfully broke through to the 3rd layer and became our distinguished guests. The other one." At this point he paused for a moment. Chen Kai stood up abruptly and said in astonishment, "Someone really succeeded? And 2 at the same time? Amazing, truly amazing. Have the 2 distinguished guests left? I want to visit them in person." "They've left," the restaurant manager said with a hint of regret. Chu Yi said, "Chen Kai, he hasn't finished speaking just now." A glint flashed in the restaurant manager's eyes as he said, "The other expert who tried to break through the 1,000 Revolution Array is quite young, but he managed to break through 5 layers in a row and succeeded all the way to the 6th layer. So far, he is our everlasting feast hall's most distinguished guest who has challenged the 1,000 Revolution Array. This time, even our little boss is alarmed." "What? Little boss also went to challenge the array?" Chen Kai had just sat down, and his butt had barely touched the chair. Then, as if his tail was on fire, he jumped up again. The restaurant manager said. A deep sense of loss could be seen on Chen Kai's face as he regretfully said, "I should have brought Brother Chu and Brother Bai here earlier if I knew about this earlier. What a pity. It's really a big pity." Chu Yi angrily glared at Chen Kai. He then looked at the restaurant manager again and asked, "You said that the other party is a young man? What's his name?" "Tan Xiao," the restaurant manager said with a smile. What's his name?" Chu Yi and Bai Tao exclaimed at the same time. The restaurant manager revealed a confused expression as he said, "He's called Tan Xiao. I'm the one who registered his information. Of course, it's just a name and an age." Chu Yi closed his eyes, but he opened them again a few seconds later. He grabbed his mobile and dialed a cell number. "Who is it? Disturbing people's sweet dreams in the middle of the night? That's rude." A confused, complaining voice came from the other end of the phone. Chu Yi said, "Young Master Long, it's me, Chu. Don't sleep yet? I want to ask you something." "What is it?" Chu Yi asked. "Your idol, Tan Xiao's friend, where is he now?" "Tan Xiao. He seems to have gone to Jingmen Island. My younger brother told me this evening when we had dinner." "What's wrong?" How come you're inquiring about Tan Xiu's matter? A forced smile was revealed on Chu Yi's face. He looked at the sluggish Bai Tao and helplessly said, if my guess is correct, I've seen Tan Xiu tonight. I seem to have a small conflict with him. What happened? Long Zhengyu's spirit was obviously shaken as he quickly asked. Chu Yi told the whole story and helplessly said, young Master Long, you don't know. Your idol seems to have done something great in Jingmen Island. Long Zhengyu said, if so, it should be true. Tang Xiu indeed knew Jia Ruidao. Do you still remember when Tang Xiu, helped me with a big favor? Jia Ruidao was the one who gambled with Tan Xiu at the gambling table. But I didn't expect that they would have contact. So, I'll tell Tan Xiu about this. This is just a trivial matter between you two. However, that jade pendant of yours, Chu Yi decisively said, give it to him. Long Zhengyu quickly said, don't. Tan Xiu usually looks amiable, but he's a very arrogant person. If you give it to him for free, I'm afraid he'll be disgusted. Also, I want to give you a piece of advice. Don't deliberately throw the game on the gambling table. He's very smart, so he should be able to see it. Once he realizes it, he'll feel that it's an unfair advantage and his impression of you will be worse. Chu Yi suddenly felt that the jade pendant in his hand had become a hot potato. He angrily glared at Chen Kai and helplessly said, all right, I know what to do. All right, I'm done. I'll hang up. Chu Yi hung up the phone and sent the restaurant manager away. He then looked at Bai Tao and said, we'll see him tonight. It should be him. Bai Tao's expression was complicated as he forced a smile and said, Tan Xiu is really something. He can really cause a commotion wherever he goes. What should we do now? Chu Yi said, let's do it tomorrow. Regardless of winning or losing, we'll express our goodwill to him. All right. Bai Tao nodded. Although it was still unclear whether Tan Xiu could invite Kang Xia or not, but he had to give face to Buddha. After all, Tan Xiu had a good relationship with Long Zhengyu, and they were also Long Zhengyu's friends. It was indeed not worth it to have a falling out over a jade pendant. Chen Kai looked at Chu Yi and Bai Tao in a daze. Never in his dreams had he ever thought that these two were friends of Jia Ruidao. The most terrible thing was that they even wanted to express their goodwill to each other. He suddenly felt that he had not flattered the right person this time. Instead, it was like he had slapped the horse's hoof. Big Brother Chu, how about I return the jade pendant to them? I'll also return the money I won from them? Although Chen Kai's heart was full of pain, he still probed. Chu Yi shook his head and said, no need. Tomorrow's gambling will be carried out as usual. Remember, don't let Yi Taifu throw the game, and don't tell him about tonight's matter. Chen Kai was secretly delighted inside, but he looked hesitant on the surface. It's decided. Chu Yi said resolutely and decisively. In the presidential suite on the top floor of the Jarvis Hotel, Tan Xiu was concentrating on practicing the gambling techniques taught by Jia Ruidao. His control was amazing. After repeated practice, in just 3 to 4 hours, he had already mastered every gambling technique to the point where it was incomparably pure. It's not that difficult. Tan Xiu tried to steal the cards and change the cards. He easily did it. His hand speed was extremely fast, and his control of strength was just right. Even if he were to gamble with others in the casino, the other party wouldn't be aware of it. Suddenly, he missed the days when he had a storage ring. If he had a storage ring, he could easily put any gambling tools in it. At that time, even if he were to secretly cheat, he wouldn't be able to find any trace. The next day, Tan Xiu got up very late. Since the gambling would start at 2 p.m., he woke up at 10 a.m. He was full of energy after washing his face and rinsing his mouth. After contacting Jia Ruidao, the 5 of them ate something and then drove to Jingmen Island's Paradise Club. Recently, almost all the gambling addicts in Jingmen Island had heard about the gambling in the Paradise Club. Yesterday, after Jia Ruidao had left halfway, the gambling house had become even more heated. A lot of people had already concluded that today's gambling house would be the last one. Therefore, when Tan Xiu and Jia Ruidao arrived at the Paradise Club, a large number of guests had already arrived. The crowded situation made them look at each other in dismay. It must be Chen Kai. This bastard deliberately leaked the news to make us lose face. Jia Yele was a narrow-minded person. This scene suddenly made him think of something bad, so he gnashed his teeth and said, "Shut up." Although Jia Ruidao also had the same idea, but at this moment, with Tan Xiu by his side, he didn't want Tan Xiu to think that he and his father were narrow-minded and gossipy people. He and Tan Xiu had been in contact until now, so he was very clear about Tan Xiu's character. If they didn't perform well, they would disappoint Tan Xiu. At this time, the surrounding guests also noticed Jia Ruidao and his disciples. They stopped one by one and pointed at Jia Ruidao and his disciples while whispering, "Did you see that? That's Jia Ruidao. Those 3 beside him are his disciples. Oh yes, one of them is his son. He's a troublemaker, a black sheep. That unlucky old Jia. This time he bit a hard bone. I hope he won't break his teeth. However, I haven't seen the young man beside him. The father conquers the country, and the son loses the country. Jia Ruidao has such a son. It's really 8 lifetimes of bad luck. If I had such a prodigal son, I would have strangled him to death. Miserable. It's really miserable. Someone has calculated that Jia Ruidao's group has recently lost 5 to 600 million yuan, and that jade pendant is said to be the only thing left behind by his wife. If there's a win, there's a loss. Sooner or later, a professional gambler will fall in it. Chapter 88. Although the voices of the surrounding guests were not loud, Jia Ruidao and his 3 apprentices could still hear them clearly. Their complexions turned ugly one by one. This was especially true for Jia Yele. His originally handsome face had turned completely red, and his face was filled with shame and anger. Tang Xiu walked beside Jia Yele and glanced at him from the side. Then he lightly said, "If you can't even endure such humiliation, then your achievements in this life will be very limited. You don't need to gamble today, just admit defeat." Jia Yele's anger was as if a basin of ice water was poured on him. What he was looking forward to the most was that Tan Xiu could take revenge for them. If Tan Xiu were to give up now, then they would have no hope at all. "Grandmaster Tang, don't worry." Jia Yele bowed his head and said. Tan Xiu nodded and walked to the luxury liner docked on the shore. The entire liner was 135.06 meters long and 16.5 meters wide, with a standard displacement of 24,320 tons and a height of 10.3 meters from the waterline to the deck. It could carry a total of 2,000 passengers and crew. It had a total of 4 floors. The lowest floor was the engine room and power room, the second floor was the passengers' room, the third floor was the restaurant, dance hall, KTV, gym, and other leisure and entertainment venues, and the fourth floor was the casino. Jia Ruidao was very familiar with this place. Under his lead, the 5 of them booked a few rooms on the second floor and then quietly waited for the liner to set sail. Since gambling was illegal, the liner would sail into the international waters every time the gambling started. The power of science and technology cannot be underestimated. Tan Xiu stayed in the room for a while before he left alone and went to the deck outside. At this moment, the liner had already set sail. Although its speed was slow, it still braved the wind and waves as it sailed toward the boundless sea. At this time, a lot of tourists had already settled down and came outside to enjoy the sea scenery. The noisy atmosphere made Tan Xiu, who liked peace and quiet, frown deeply. He observed the surroundings and finally stopped for a moment at the glass window on the 4th floor. The 4th floor. Tan Xiu entered the viewing hall and sat near the window. There were not many people here, only 2s and 3s of people sitting everywhere, whispering to each other. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man came to Tan Xiu accompanied by a few men who looked very successful. "Hello, Mr. Tang." The moment Miao Wentong saw Tan Xiu, he wanted to run away immediately, because facing Tan Xiu, he would be reminded of the embarrassing scene last night. However, he had to admit that Tan Xiu was really amazing. After a night of self-reflection, he was sure that he had misjudged people, said the wrong things, and done the wrong things. Therefore, after concluding his own mistake, his admiration for Tan Xiu was born spontaneously. "It's you?" Tan Xiu frowned, and the expression on his face turned cold. Miao Wenong was keenly aware of Tan Xiu's attitude and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. However, he was thick-skinned enough. In order to ease the relationship with Tan Xiu, he immediately said, "Mr. Tang, I didn't sleep for half a night last night and conducted a serious self-reflection. Therefore, I apologize for my attitude yesterday. I hope that you, the Prime Minister, will be magnanimous and not stoop to my level." Tan Xiu still sat as steady as a mountain and indifferently said, "You have a good attitude." Miao Wenong quickly said, "It's my fault, so I naturally have to correct it. Mr. Tang, I hope you can give me some face to make up for my mistake yesterday. I'll invite you to the Paradise Club today to formally apologize to you." "No need." Tan Xiu directly refused. The several middle-aged men standing next to Miao Wenong were all business elites in various industries. For many people, their status was distinguished, and it was natural for them to be respected by others. However, Tan Xiu's attitude seemed to have touched their bottom line. Miao Wenong was their distinguished guest, but Tan Xiu refused him without giving any face, which made them feel humiliated. "Brother Miao, who is this?" A middle-aged man couldn't figure out Tan Xiu's background, so he asked. Miao Wenong looked at Tan Xiu with an awkward expression. He was barely able to get rid of the embarrassment when the middle-aged man next to him asked. However, he had seen countless people in his life and was very smart. He could tell that Tan Xiu didn't like to be disturbed just by looking at Tan Xiu's appearance. Therefore, he simply introduced, "This is Mr. Tang." Immediately after, Miao Wenong took out a business card holder from his pocket and took out a business card. He then put it in front of Tan Xiu and said, "This is my business card, Mr. Tang. You can call me whenever you have time. I'll owe you this apology banquet first." After saying that, he didn't even ask Tan Xiu for his business card. He nodded to the people around him and strode to the other floor of the viewing hall. His action made the business elites around him look at each other in dismay. A deep mystery arose in their hearts. Who is he? Who is he? Miao Wenong was the head of the Miao group in Qingzhou. He was a famous and powerful figure in the entire Qingzhou. Moreover, it was rumored that Miao Wenong also practiced martial arts and was very powerful. The security company he established could be ranked among the top 10 in the country. How could such a powerful figure like him be so submissive to a young man? Several business elites of Jingmen Island exchanged glances with each other. They then took out their business cards and put them on the table in front of Tan Xiu. They then introduced themselves in the simplest language and followed Miao Wenong. "These people are really boring," Tan Xiu muttered inside. He grabbed the business cards and stuffed them into his pocket without looking at them. He was not good at interpersonal communication. Even in the immortal world, recalling the past events, Tan Xiu's heart sank. Because of Jia Ruidao's matter, he would have to waste a few days. Therefore, he decided that regardless of the outcome, he must thoroughly settle this matter and then look for herbs, ores, and other rare treasures that could help him cultivate. On the other side, in front of the viewing window, a middle-aged man turned his head and glanced at Tan Xiu. Then, he looked at Miao Wenong and asked in a low voice, "Brother Miao, what's the origin of that young man surnamed Tang? He didn't even give you face?" "Yeah. Who the hell is that kid? Isn't he too arrogant?" Another middle-aged man spoke with a bit of indignation in his tone, yet his voice was very low. Miao Wenong forced a smile and said, "You should have heard about what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall last night, right? Xiao Mingjin and I successfully broke into the third layer of the Thousand Revolution Array and became the Everlasting Feast Hall's VIPs. And he's the one who broke into the sixth layer." "What? How is that possible? Heavens!" Several Jingmen Island's business elites suddenly looked shocked and exclaimed out loud. Miao Wenong forced a smile and said, "My reaction was the same as yours. I also thought it was impossible. But the fact is that I saw it with my own eyes. How could I be wrong? The reason why I apologized to him was because I ridiculed him before he broke into the Thousand Revolution Array yesterday. As a result, I was slapped in the face." A middle-aged man whispered, "Brother Miao, he's too young. He looks like he's in his 20s. How could he be so powerful?" Miao Wenong forced a smile and said, "You ask me, but who should I ask? In short, We shouldn't provoke such a young man with unfathomable strength and aptitude. In this world, it's better to have more friends than more enemies. Yes, yes, yes. Several people repeatedly nodded in agreement. At 1:50 p.m., Tan Xiu came to the casino on the 4th floor. At this moment, the casino was crowded with gamblers trying their skills in front of all kinds of gambling equipment. The Paradise Club provided gambling venues, but they wouldn't intervene in the gambling. However, the Paradise Club would take a cut of the total amount of gambling on each table. Although it was only 1%, but they still made a lot of money every day by taking a cut. Grandmaster Tang, the gambling will be held in the VIP private room. My master is already waiting for you in the VIP private room. Gong Daong was waiting in the casino's lobby. Upon seeing Tan Xiu's arrival, he immediately respectfully greeted him. Tan Xiu nodded and said, "There are only a few minutes left before the gambling starts. Take me there. I still have other things to do after this game." "Alright," Gong Daong respectfully replied. In the VIP private room of hundreds of square meters, all kinds of gambling equipment had been prepared. Apart from Jia Ruidao and his apprentices, as well as Chen Kai and his professional gambler Yi Taifu, there were also hundreds of gamblers who came to watch. The gamblers who could come to this VIP private room were not ordinary. At least, they must be recognized by one of the parties before they could be allowed to enter. Not only Miao Wentong, but also several Jingmen Island's business elites. Upon seeing Tan Xiu's arrival, Miao Wentong suddenly stared blankly. It seemed that he knew one of the gambling parties. The others also looked at each other in dismay. Although there were many people in the VIP private room, the order was very good. More than 20 security personnel in black suits ensured that no one would disturb the gambling house during the process. "Brother Tang, you finally came. The gambling game is about to start." Jia Ruidao and Tan Xiu were burning with impatience as he quickly came to greet him. Tan Xiu said, "I know what I'm doing." His eyes looked at Chen Kai, who was sitting across the table. However, he found that Chen Kai's eyes were a bit erratic. On the contrary, the bald middle-aged man beside Chen Kai had a bad expression in his eyes. He rubbed his hands and looked eager to try. Tan Xiu walked a few steps forward. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he looked at the middle-aged man and asked with a sinking voice, "Are you Yi Taifu, the professional gambler known as Golden Finger in Macau?" The middle-aged man raised his chin and looked at Tan Xiu with contempt and said, "Yes, it's me. Or you. Jia Ruidao lost and didn't dare to come to the table, so he invited you to gamble with me?" Tan Xiu pulled out a chair and sat opposite Yi Taifu. He then said indifferently, "Yes. Today, I'll accompany you to play. However, I'm afraid of trouble and I don't like complicated gambling games. How about we play something simple today?" Yi Taifu asked, "How simple?" Tan Xiu said, "Let's tie a golden flower and compare the size. What do you think?" Tie a golden flower? Compare the size? Yi Taifu looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression. He then said with a smile, "Are you sure you want to compete with me in this? I'll tell you in advance that the bet can't be too small. The base bet is 1 million. Do you dare?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" Tan Xiu's eyes turned cold as he happily said. Chapter 89. Jia Ruidao, who was standing next to Tan Xiu, immediately reminded him, "Brother Tang, my jade pendant." Tan Xiu glanced at him and lightly said, "Don't be impatient. Since the other party has given us the opportunity, I believe they won't go back on their words." "Alright." Jia Ruidao was a bit reluctant, but he didn't dare to go against Tan Xiu's words at this time. A strange expression appeared on Miao Wentong's face in the crowd. He didn't expect that Tan Xiu would turn out to be one of the gambling parties. He knew that Tan Xiu was a cultivator and had great attainments in arrays. But he didn't expect that Tan Xiu was also a gambler. Originally, he was somewhat reluctant when he was pulled over by several Jingmen Island's business elites. But now, a strong interest arose in his heart. He wanted to see how strong Tan Xiu, who had reached the heaven-defying realm in breaking arrays, was in gambling. At this time, from the VIP private room's door, Ouyang Lulu came in with a middle-aged woman wearing white gloves. Chu Yi and Bai Tao followed behind them. "Welcome everyone to my Paradise Club. As the name suggests, This is a paradise for the guests. I hope you can have a good time here. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ouyang Lulu, the owner of the Paradise Club. The one beside me is the most outstanding dealer of our Paradise Club casino. I can guarantee that she will be the one presiding over this gambling house. She will be absolutely fair and just. Ouyang Lulu observed Tan Xiao and Yi Taifu a few times as she spoke with a beaming smile. Clap, clap, clap. Warm applause reverberated in the VIP private room. The effect of a beautiful woman was very good, and the effect of a noble beauty was even better. Whether it was her figure or appearance, Ouyang Lulu belonged to the world's first class. Her words won the applause of the entire hall. The charming dealer came to the gambling table and calmly said with a smile, "Have the two of you decided on the method of gambling?" Yi Taifu said, "Tai Jin Hua." The dealer's expression froze as a smile outlined on the corner of her mouth. As the top dealer of the Paradise Club, she presided over almost all big gambling houses. However, there were very few people who would play the golden flower in such a big gamble, especially when two people were betting against each other. She looked at Tan Xiao and asked with a smile, "Are the rules set? How much is the base price? What is the minimum increment for each bid? What's the upper limit?" Yi Taifu stood up. His arms propped on the gambling table as he grinned and said, "This little brother is very arrogant and doesn't want to waste time here. Therefore, I suggest that the minimum bid should be 1 million, and each increment should not be less than 1 million. Also, there's no upper limit." The dealer looked at Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao said indifferently, "I have no opinion." The dealer nodded and said, "Since the two of you have made your decision, then we'll respect this bet. Now, please show me your chips." Jia Ruidao quickly took the chips from his son and placed them in front of Tan Xiao. Then, he forced a smile and said, "Brother Tang, I've lost all the money I borrowed. There were only 56 million left." "Enough," Tan Xiao said indifferently. A few meters away from the gambling table, Yi Taifu heard Jia Ruidao's words. He suddenly burst into laughter and said, "I thought that today's bet would be big. Turns out you only have 56 million left. Boring, really boring. I say, Jia Ruidao, you're a famous professional gambler. Don't tell me that you can't borrow money from others anymore." Many of the onlookers had seen the bet between Jia Ruidao and Yi Taifu before. They also knew that Jia Ruidao had lost a lot of money recently. However, the winner was the king, while the loser was the thief. The loser would never be praised. Suddenly, the sound of discussion sounded in the surroundings. Jia Ruidao is actually strong on the outside but weak on the inside. How much money did he lose? It's just a few 100 million, and now he can't borrow money? Is it because his character is too bad? Or is he not good at making friends? He deserves to lose. His capital is so little, yet he still dared to continue gambling. He really doesn't know how he died. A few days ago, I saw him lose so much that his eyes turned red. He even lost the only relic left by his wife, a jade pendant of excellent quality. I thought that I would see an unprecedented bet today, but I didn't expect that Jia Ruidao would be so poor. 56 million? I'm afraid the speed at which he loses today is even faster than before. Yeah. With such a small amount of capital, letting such a young man to gamble on the stage, isn't this the same as giving money to others? I've seen stupid people, but I've never seen someone stupid to this extent. I regret coming. Jia Ruidao was a professional gambler. His gambling skills were superb, and his hearing was naturally very good. The surrounding people's discussion was clearly heard by him. In a flash, his old face turned red, and his eyes were filled with grievance. Even his 3 apprentices' eyes were almost spurting out flames of anger. They were glaring at Yi Taifu, wishing that they could pull out his tendons and skin him alive. Tan Xiao looked at Yi Taifu with cold eyes. He secretly sneered in his heart. Although standing high and seeing far, standing high also meant falling hard. If he lost this bet, then so be it. But if he were to throw away his helmet and throw away his armor, and lose everything when the time comes, he would probably regret his arrogance to the point that his intestines would turn green. Less nonsense, let's begin. Yi Taifu arrogantly gave Tan Xiao a provocative look. He sat back on the chair and said with a sinking tone, "Let's begin." Ding! The dealer nodded and pulled the bell. The entire VIP private room suddenly quieted down. She took the 8 decks of cards from the waiter and placed them on the table. Then, she took out a brand new deck of cards. After a dazzling shuffle, she said, "Both sides, please check the cards." "No need." Yi Taifu believed in the fairness of the Paradise Club casino, so he directly refused. Tan Xiu also shook his head. He was not afraid of the other party's tricks. Moreover, if the other party really wanted to play tricks, even if he checked the cards, he wouldn't be able to find anything fishy. The dealer slightly nodded. After cutting the cards, each person was dealt 3 cards, and then the rest of the cards were placed on the table in front of her. Tan Xiu picked up his card and casually glanced at it. A bit of a smile was revealed on his face. He had been paying attention to the dealer's action of shuffling the cards. Others might not be able to see it with their eyes, but he could clearly observe it with his spiritual sense. He even knew which card was in the stack, what number it was, and what kind of flower it was. A pair of 2s and a 5 of hearts. Tan Xiu looked at his card and observed the other side's cards through his spiritual sense. To his satisfaction, the first deck of cards was bigger than the other side. Because the other side's biggest card was an ace of spades. The other 2 cards were a 5 of hearts and a 3 of hearts. 1 million. Yi Taifu revealed a trace of a smile. He grabbed the chips in front of him and directly threw them in the middle of the table. Tan Xiu pretended to hesitate for a moment. Then he also grabbed the chips in front of him and threw them in the middle. However, Yi Taifu had been staring at Tan Xiu's expression. Tan Xiu's moment of hesitation was keenly caught by him. Therefore, he once again grabbed the chips, threw them and said, 2 million. Tan Xiu also directly threw 2 million chips and said, "Call." Yi Taifu was startled. He deeply looked at Tan Xiu, threw 2 million chips and said, "Continue to call." According to the cards, Yi Taifu was very clear that his cards were very small. But he didn't want to give up in the first round. Especially when he was keenly aware of Tan Xiu's moment of hesitation. He guessed that Tan Xiu's cards were absolutely not big. Moreover, this first round was just an appetizer. Even if he really lost in the end, he wouldn't lose much money. Chen Kai had promised that today's gambling stake would total to 500 million. "I also call," Tan Xiu said again. Yi Taifu sneered inwardly. In order to intimidate Tan Xiu, he directly pushed the pile of chips in front of him, which represented 10 million, and said with a sinking voice, 10 million. Tan Xiu was obviously stunned for a moment. He didn't understand where Yi Taifu's confidence came from. He even bet 10 million all at once. In addition to the money on the table earlier, each of them had taken out 14 million in this round. However, no matter what the other party's reason was, his cards were bigger than the other party's, so he didn't need to be afraid. 20 million. Tan Xiu pushed the chips and calmly said. Yi Taifu's brows wrinkled. He looked at Tan Xiu's appearance. He thought that Tan Xiu was pretending to be calm, but in fact, he also had the same intention of intimidating him. Therefore, he once again pushed out 20 million chips and lightly said, "It's just the beginning. No need to play so big. I'll open your cards with 20 million. "Are you sure?" Tan Xiu calmly asked. Yi Taifu sneered, "Of course I'm sure. Don't tell me you don't want to open your cards?" Tan Xiu didn't speak and directly opened his cards. In a flash, Yi Taifu's complexion turned red. An unwilling expression was revealed in his eyes. He had guessed that Tan Xiu's cards were not big. Looking at Tan Xiu's cards, he knew that his guess was correct. However, this small card was enough to crush him to death. However, in order to not let Tan Xiu's momentum rise, he casually threw away the cards in his hand and lightly said, "Experts don't win the first 3 rounds. Seeing that you're a young man, I'll let you taste the taste of winning money. But after the 3rd round, you must be mentally prepared." Tan Xiu looked at the dealer who pushed all the chips in the middle of the table aside from the 1 million chips. A trace of a smile appeared on his face as he nodded and said, "Thank you for letting me win. I'll wait and see." The first round. He had won a whopping 34 million. This kind of situation made him sigh. Winning money in gambling was too easy. No wonder so many people like to gamble. After all, everyone wanted to have the dream of suddenly becoming rich. Jure, who was standing beside Tan Xiu, had a trace of happiness on his face. After all, Tan Xiu had a good start. This was a very auspicious event. Even his 3 apprentices were beaming with happiness. They were extremely satisfied with Tan Xiu's first win. The people who were watching the battle all had surprised expressions on their faces. After all, they didn't expect that an unknown young man would be able to win against the famous Yi Taifu in the first round. Although Yi Taifu said that he would let Tan Xiu win, everyone could see that his words were insincere. Chapter 90. The second game. After the dealer shuffled and dealt the cards, he looked at Tan Xiu and said, "Mr. Tang won the last game. This time, it's Mr. Tang's turn to speak first." This time, Tan Xiu didn't open his 3 cards because he could use his divine sense to observe his cards. He could also observe Yi Taifu's cards. This kind of magical cheating method was absolutely a divine tool to swindle people. 10 million. Tan Xiu pushed out 10 million chips and said without batting an eyelid. Yi Taifu saw that Tan Xiu didn't look at his cards. In order to not lose his momentum, he also chose to hide his cards and directly pushed out 10 million chips and said, "I follow." 20 million. Tan Xiu didn't even blink and pushed out his chips again. Yi Taifu frowned and pushed out 20 million chips again and said, "Continue to follow." 50 million. Tan Xiu calmly said, "What?" Yi Taifu was stunned. His eyes revealed a disbelieving expression. He had been a professional gambler for more than 20 years, but this was the first time he met someone like Tan Xiu. This was only the second game, but Tan Xiu didn't even look at his cards and directly threw out 80 million chips. One must know. They were playing Golden Flower. Tan Xiu had just won 34 million. Adding his original capital, he only had a total of 90 million. In other words, once Yi Taifu followed, he was bound to see Tan Xiu's cards. This was also the last time he would bet. After hesitating for a moment, he reached out and touched his 3 cards. 7 of hearts, 7 of spades, 5 of clubs. His biggest card was 7 pairs? Yi Taifu was silent for a moment. He pushed out 100 million chips and said with a sinking voice, "I follow." "Look at your cards." Tan Xiu faintly smiled. He reached out and opened his 3 cards, Jack of hearts, Jack of spades, and 3 of diamonds. His biggest card was J pairs. In an instant, Yi Taifu's complexion turned pale. He never dreamed that the second game would turn out to be like this. Not only did he lose, but he also lost 131 million yuan. Including the 34 million yuan he lost in the first round, he had lost 165 million yuan in just 2 rounds. Yi Taifu raised his head and glanced at Chen Kai at the side. He saw that Chen Kai's complexion was unsightly. Suddenly, he felt somewhat guilty in his heart. However, he firmly believed that Tang Xiu was just lucky in these 2 matches. However, he did not even use his real gambling skills. The surrounding onlookers began to discuss among themselves. Amazing. It's only been a few minutes, right? That unknown young man had actually won a total of 165 million. This speed is much faster than all the money printing machines in the world running at the same time. There will be talents in every generation, and they will lead the way for decades. Yi Taifu's reputation in the professional gambling world could be said to have spread far and wide. But now, he actually lost twice to an unknown young man. The younger generation will surpass the older in time. No wonder so many people like to gamble. The speed of making money is really fast. Even I can't help but want to play a few rounds. I thought there wouldn't be a good show today. But now I realize that I was wrong. I really hope that young man can show off his skills and create a miracle. His luck is really good. Moreover, this young man's courage is really boundless. He didn't even look at his cards and directly threw out 80 million. Admirable. Those who achieve great things must have great courage. Today, I have seen it for myself. Jia Ruidao beside Tan Xiu was ecstatic. Jia Ruidao's 3 apprentices were also ecstatic. Even Miao Wentong in the crowd had a whole new level of respect for Tan Xiu. Chu Yi and Bai Tao, who were in the crowd, were even more interested in Tang Xiu. Among the crowd, there was only one person who had little interest in Tan Xiu, and that was the owner of the Paradise Club, Ouyang Lulu. She only thought that Tan Xiu's luck was good in the first 2 rounds. The third round. The dealer shuffled the cards. After the cards were dealt, she looked at Tan Xiu and said, "Mr. Tang, you won the last round. Please speak first." Tan Xiu's divine sense had clearly observed the cards on both sides. He found that his 3 cards were Jack of Spades, 8 of Hearts, and 2 of Hearts. Yi Taifu's 3 cards were King of Hearts, 9 of Clubs, and 5 of Clubs. His cards were not as big as Yi Taifu's. 10 million. Tan Xiu directly pushed out 10 million chips and calmly said, Yi Taifu didn't choose to hide his cards this time, but directly picked them up. When he saw his cards, he secretly shook his head. He threw the cards and said, "I'm not calling." Tan Xiu faintly smiled as he looked at the dealer who pushed the chips to him and said, "You've let me win 3 times. I hope you won't let me win again next time." Yi Taifu coldly snorted and said, "Rest assured, I'll make you leave crying." Tan Xiu said without being salty nor light, "Don't talk big until the end." The 4th round. The dealer shuffled the cards and dealt them. Then he said, "Mr. Tang, you won the last round. Please speak first." Tan Xiu had already seen the cards on both sides through his divine sense. He immediately laughed in his heart. He directly pushed out 10 million chips and said, 10 million. Yi Taifu was silent for a moment. He also chose to hide his cards and followed with 10 million chips. Tan Xiu still didn't look at his cards and pushed out 50 million chips. Yi Taifu stared blankly for a moment. Suddenly, a bad premonition arose in his heart. However, he firmly believed in his gambling skills. Even if the dealer gave him a small hand, he still had a way to turn defeat into victory. Therefore, he directly pushed out 50 million chips and lightly said, "I'm calling." Tan Xiu directly pushed out all the chips in front of him at once. He lightly smiled and said, "I have a total of 222 million chips. I'm calling all of them. If you can win this round, I'll immediately leave. If you lose, your arrogant words are the same as slapping your own face. Continue or end, I'll give you the choice." Yi Taifu's eyelids twitched. The bad premonition in his heart was getting more and more intense. Tan Xiu pushed out all the chips, indicating that he followed with 161 million. If he followed, he would have to pay the same amount. Moreover, this was the case after he chose to hide his cards. If he looked at his cards and lost, he would have to double the amount. What should I do? Should I look or not? Follow or not? Yi Taifu pondered for a moment and finally decided to look at his cards. Ace of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds. Golden flower? Moreover, it's ace gold? A trace of a smile outlined on the corner of Yi Taifu's mouth. He directly counted 322 million chips and said with a faint smile, "I'm calling. Open your cards." Tan Xiu secretly laughed inside. His fingers flicked, and the second card of the 3 cards instantly shot toward the stack of cards in front of the dealer. Almost in a flash, the card in the stack shot toward the card in front of him at a strange angle. As for the card he ejected, it remained in the stack of cards. The cards were exchanged at an extremely fast speed. It was so fast that the naked eye simply couldn't capture their trajectory. Even professional gamblers like Yi Taifu and Jia Ruidao, who had extremely sharp eyesight, couldn't detect it. However, among the people present, there was someone who noticed it. It was the cultivator, Miao Wentong. In the situation where no one was aware of it, a faint smile appeared on Miao Wentong's face. 3 aces. Tan Xiu opened his cards and said with a faint smile. He was very clear that Yi Taifu had lost. Moreover, he didn't even have the chance to cheat. Impossible! Yi Taifu suddenly jumped up from his chair when he saw the 3 cards that Tan Xiu opened. His eyes were as big as a brass bell, and an unbelievable light burst out from his eyes. He had calculated thousands of times and was even prepared to cheat. But he never thought that Tan Xiu's cards would turn out to be 3 aces. How to change? Change to the lowest card 2, 3 and 5? Apart from these 3 cards, there were no other 3 cards that could win against Tan Xiu. But he didn't prepare the lowest card, 2, 3, and 5. Tan Xiu looked at Yi Taifu, who had lost his composure, and lightly said, "Maybe you still have a chance to win. Show me your cards." Yi Taifu's face was ashen. He absent-mindedly turned his head to look at Chen Kai and said with difficulty, "I'm sorry, I lost. I'm powerless to reverse the situation." Powerless to reverse the situation. These words were like a heavy hammer that fiercely pounded on Chen Kai's heart. One must know that Yi Taifu had lost 333 million in this round. Coupled with the 166 million he had lost before, he had lost a total of 499 million. He had taken out 500 million this time, but Yi Taifu had only won 4 rounds, and he only had 1 million left. This result was hard for him to accept. The surrounding crowd suddenly boiled up. Countless people looked at Tan Xiu with disbelief. They could feel their heartbeats speeding up. The sound of discussion was much louder than before. Too awesome. He won 4 rounds in a row and directly won the opponent's money, leaving only 1 million. This heaven-defying means is simply amazing. God of gamblers. Yi Taifu is already powerful enough. But this young man directly crushed him to death. It seems that after tonight, this young man named Tan Xiu will surely be famous in the gambling world. He's simply my idol. 4 rounds and winning nearly 500 million. This should be the craziest gambling house in recent years, right? This Tan Xiu is really unfathomable. Yi Taifu has lost his face today. He was so arrogant before, but now his face has been ruthlessly slapped. I suddenly remembered a saying, "The higher you stand, the harder you fall." In the Yangtze River, the new waves push the old waves, and the old waves die on the beach. Yi Taifu sat back on the chair in a daze and painfully closed his eyes. He was once the winner praised by countless people. But today he had fallen from the high clouds, smashing his body into pieces. He was finished. He knew that he was finished. He knew that his reputation would plummet in the future. Even if he returned to the casino in Macau, the treatment he would get would plummet. In the crowd, Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at each other in dismay. They were sure that Yi Taifu absolutely did not throw the game. Because Chen Kai did not have the courage to give away 500 million to Tan Xiu. But Tan Xiu won so easily? Moreover, he won 4 rounds in a row, and won so beautifully? Who was Yi Taifu? Even if they did not like gambling, they had heard of Yi Taifu's great name. Chapter 91. In the crowd, Chu Yi's eyes swept over Tan Xiu with a bit of admiration as he whispered, "Zhenyu is right. This Tan Xiu is absolutely unfathomable." Bai Tao heavily nodded and said with a face full of approval, "That's right. I also have the same feeling now. Besides, I found that he can cause a sensation no matter where he goes. It was like that in the everlasting feast hall, and it's the same here. It seems that we have to find an opportunity to get to know him." Chu Yi's mind was outstanding. After being silent for a moment, he whispered, "I think that if we go up and recommend ourselves, he may be too lazy to care about us. If you want to make friends with a person, you must observe his face, observe his mood, and then cater to his interest. Alright, let's send someone to investigate him and see what he needs." Alright. Bai Tao agreed. Ouyang Lulu, who was in front of them, had an inconceivable expression on her face as she looked at the winner of Tan Xiu. Suddenly, she recalled something and immediately turned to look at Chu Yi and Bai Tao behind her, asking, "I suddenly remembered that you once told me about a young man. His name is the same as this Tan Xiu who participated in the gambling." Bai Tao forced a smile and said, "It's more than the same name. It's the same person." What? Ouyang Lulu was stunned. She never thought that the Tan Xiu in front of her was the young man that Bai Tao and Chu Yi praised endlessly. He was the one who made the gold medal manager, Kang Xia, to personally rush to Star City from the imperial capital. He was also the one that even Zhenyu worshipped. Who was he? How could he be so powerful? Ouyang Lulu suddenly realized that this young man, who seemed to be a bit handsome, was unexpectedly full of mysterious aura. It was as if he was shrouded in a layer of fog that she couldn't see through. "How about it? Do you still want to play?" Tan Xiu looked at the dealer pushing all the chips in front of him. He immediately looked at Yi Taifu with a faint smile and said, "Play." The fierce voice was not from Yi Taifu's mouth, but from Chen Kai's angry face. Tan Xiu shrugged his shoulders and said in a relaxed manner, "But you don't have any money. 1,000,000 chips is only the bottom line. Do you think you can play?" Chen Kai took out a jade pendant carved with a coiling dragon and phoenix pattern and shouted in a deep voice, "Having no money doesn't mean you don't have the qualifications to continue gambling." This jade pendant belonged to Jia Ruidao. The next round of gambling would be decided in a single round. If you lose, give me all the chips in front of you. If you win, I'll return this jade pendant to you. Tan Xiu looked at Jia Ruidao. He was keenly aware that the moment Chen Kai took out the jade pendant, Jia Ruidao's breathing became rapid, and his eyes became incomparably fervent. "What's your decision?" Tan Xiu looked at Jia Ruidao and asked. Jia Ruidao struggled for a long time in his heart. Finally, he clenched his teeth and made up his mind, "Let's bet." Tan Xiu nodded lightly. He looked at Chen Kai and said, "Then I'll play with you again. After this round, no matter who wins or loses, the grudges between us will be written off. What do you think?" "I agree." Chen Kai knew that Tan Xiu had an extraordinary origin and was also a cultivator. Even if Tan Xiu didn't say it, he didn't dare to provoke Tan Xiu. Therefore, his answer was very straightforward. Tan Xiu looked at the dealer, nodded and asked, "What kind of gambling tools are we going to use?" Yi Taifu, in order to adjust his mentality and regain his confidence, said with a sinking tone, "You were the winner before, so I give you the choice." With a strange expression, Tan Xiu asked, "Are you sure about this?" Yi Taifu confidently said, "Yes." Tan Xiu looked at the dealer and lightly said, "I'll have to trouble you to get a new deck of playing cards." The dealer nodded and took out a new deck of playing cards. He handed it to Tan Xiu and asked, "How do you want to play?" Tan Xiu looked at Yi Taifu and lightly said, "Gambling skills are nothing more than eyesight, hearing, and hand speed. Today, we'll learn from the god of gamblers from the TV. Let the dealer scatter the new deck of cards in the air. We'll act at the same time. Each of us will grab a card and compare the cards. In this deck of cards, the biggest is the king, and the smallest is the ace. How about it?" Yi Taifu was startled. He didn't expect that Tan Xiu wouldn't play according to common sense and would even choose this kind of gambling method. One must know that his hand speed was very fast. Needless to say, his eyesight was as sharp as an eagle's. "I agree." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "Then, get ready. Let's begin." The dealer looked at Tan Xiu and Yi Taifu and immediately said, "Both of you, please come with me to the open space. I'll ask someone to draw 3 lines with the same distance on this open space. Each of us will stand on the line and I'll scatter the cards. You two will grab each other's cards. Whoever grabs the biggest card will be the winner." "Good. I agree." Tan Xiu and Yi Taifu nodded at the same time. In the crowd, Chen Kai was still immersed in anger. When he heard Tan Xiu and Yi Taifu's gambling method, his heart was a bit irritated. He felt that something was wrong. But he couldn't tell what was wrong. He could only stare at Jia Ruidao and his disciple with an unkind expression. Isn't this just looking for abuse? In another direction, Miao Wentong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Yi Taifu. His heart was full of sympathy. He didn't know about others, but he knew that Tan Xiu was an expert who could break through the 1,000 revolution array's 6th layer. His strength was absolutely formidable. Whether it was his eyesight or his hand speed, both were fast to the extreme. A few minutes later, the dealer stood in the middle, while Tan Xiu and Yi Taifu stood on both sides. She looked at the two of them and said, "Both of you, I'm ready. I hope you can cheer up and win this crucial gambling game. Now, I'll start counting down from 3. After counting, I'll scatter this deck of cards in the air. 3 to 1 0. The dealer swung her arm and used all of her strength to scatter the cards in her hand above her head. Humph! Before the dealer scattered the cards, Tan Xiu's divine sense had firmly locked on the king card in the deck. After the cards were scattered, he moved lightning fast. The king card had not yet risen to the top, but he had already rushed up. Almost in a flash, the king card was already in his hand, and his feet once again landed on the ground. On the other side, Yi Taifu's movements were a few beats slower than Tan Xiu's. His eyes quickly turned, looking for the position of the king card. Seeing Tan Xiu taking the initiative, his complexion abruptly changed. He hesitated for a moment because he didn't see the king card, but the little king card. Then, he flew up and snatched the little king card into his hand. His eyes continued to sweep across the cards that filled the sky. 10 seconds later, the rest of the deck of cards fell to the ground. Some were facing up, some were facing up. The dealer came back to the middle of the two and said with a smile, "Both of you have grabbed the cards you want. Now, I hope that both of you will show your cards at the same time." Yi Taifu didn't find the king card. Among all the cards facing up on the ground, there was no king card. His heart was a bit perturbed. Looking at the expressionless face of Tan Xiu, he secretly prayed in his heart, hoping that Tan Xiu wouldn't grab the king card. Otherwise, he would really suffer a crushing defeat. Little king. Little king. Both of them showed their cards at the same time. In a split second, Yi Taifu's heart felt like it had fallen into an ice cave. His body turned stiff like a stone. In his eyes, there was no longer perturbed, but intense disbelief and pain. In this last round of gambling, he seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. But after he grasped it, he found that this straw not only couldn't help him, but also fiercely slapped him. What was adding fuel to the fire? What was adding fuel to the fire? This last round happened to be the perfect interpretation. Wow, the atmosphere of the scene was ignited in an instant. Everyone's eyes were brimming with fiery passion. Their target was Tan Xiu, not Yi Taifu. Eyesight and hand speed. This was the most basic and most important ability of a gambling expert. But now, Tan Xiu didn't have any chance to use any tricks. He could only rely on his own ability to win the gambling game. This made many people think that Tan Xiu's previous win was entirely due to luck. But now, their thinking had completely changed. In a fight between experts, luck played a part, but gambling skills were more important. It was said that 9 out of 10 gambles were lost because 8 out of 10 gambles were cheating. There was a bit of sympathy in the dealer's eyes. She quickly looked at Yi Taifu and said, "Mr. Tang has grabbed the king card, and Mr. Yi has grabbed the little king card. I declare that Mr. Tang is the winner of this gambling game." Puff. Yi Taifu was furious. Under the huge blow, his mouth spurted out a mouthful of blood. As his vision darkened, his body stiffened and fell backward. Chen Kai's complexion was ashen. He was like a mad wild dog. Looking at Yi Taifu who fell in front of him, not only he didn't have any sympathy, but he also ran a few steps and fiercely kicked Yi Taifu. In this gambling game, not only did he lose all the money he won from Jia Rui Dao, but he also lost all his capital. How could he not be angry? However, his action made everyone's complexion stagnant. Their hearts were filled with disbelief. Quite a number of people even showed anger and began to discuss in low voices. Isn't this Chen Kai too shameless? He can't afford to lose? Although Yi Taifu had lost today and lost miserably, but he had helped him win a lot of money before. Now that he lost, he treats him like this? Chen Kai's character is too bad, right? His Chen family's old face has been thrown away by him. He can be used in front of others, but not in the back. Simply shameless enough to make one's hair stand on end. I've decided to immediately terminate the business with the Chen family. With this kind of character, I think the rest of the Chen family is also not so good. It's really a pity for Yi Taifu, a gambling expert of his generation, to fall into such a miserable end. I really want to beat Chen Kai up. He's a famous person in Jingmen Island, but he doesn't even have the slightest demeanor. I'm really drunk on him. Our Jingmen Island's face has been thrown away by this Chen Kai guy. Losing is losing. He can pick it up and let it go. Why does he need to make such a contemptible move? It's really outrageous. Shameless. Chapter 92. At this moment, Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at Chen Kai with contempt. They secretly regretted coming to Jingmen Island to wade into these muddy waters. Seeing that the gambling game was over, the two of them quietly left. As the owner of the Paradise Club, Ouyang Lulu didn't stay for long. Her contemptuous eyes lingered on Chen Kai for a moment before her eyes stopped on Tan Xiu. She looked at Tan Xiu deeply and then chased after Chu Yi and Bai Tao. She wanted to know more about Tan Xiu from Chu Yi and Bai Tao. She wanted to know more about Tan Xiu, who she couldn't understand. At this moment, Jia Ruidao received the only relic of his deceased wife, the exquisite jade pendant carved with a coiling dragon and phoenix. His eyes were filled with sparkling tears. Originally, he thought that his life was over. Not only did he lose all his assets, but he also owed huge debts outside. He even lost the last relic of his deceased wife. However, Tan Xiu's victory made him feel as if he had returned to heaven from hell. "Brother Tang, thank you, thank you." Jia Ruidao's tone was somewhat whimpering, but every word he said was filled with deep sincerity. Tan Xiu couldn't stand others being deeply grateful to him, nor was he used to people communicating with him in this way. He indifferently shook his head and said, "Prepare to go back to the hotel. Also, if possible, it's best if you can help me book a flight ticket for tonight or tomorrow. I'm going back to Star City." Jia Ruidao quickly said, "Brother Tang, Xiaolong said that he helped you apply for a week's vacation. It's only 2 days now, so you don't need to rush back. On one hand, I want to exchange my winnings and deposit them into your account. On the other hand, I also want to express my gratitude and take you to have fun in Jingmen Island. You don't know, but there are many fun places in Jingmen Island. I'm sure you'll like some of them." This, Tan Xiu hesitated. He wasn't interested in the fun places in Jingmen Island. His biggest interest was that huge sum of money. According to the agreement between him and Jia Ruidao, he could get half of the nearly 500 million he won. Upon seeing Tan Xiu's hesitation, Gong Dalong quickly said, "Grandmaster Tang, my master is right. We need to convert the chips into money and transfer the money to our accounts. This will take some time. Moreover, I know of a private villa that not only has a beautiful environment, but also has precious wild meat. A few days ago, I heard that the manor hired dozens of martial arts experts to enter a nearby island and hunt a sea flood dragon that had become a spirit. This was the second time in the 10 years since the establishment of the villa that they had obtained a sea serpent. For the first time, many people ate sea serpent meat. I heard that the taste was simply the best in the world." A sea serpent that had become a spirit? Tan Xiu's eyes lit up, and he was instantly tempted. For his current cultivation, he needed materials from various parts of a fierce beast's body, such as hair, flesh, bones, claws, and so on. These were the most basic materials for refining the body-tempering liquid. In addition, if he encountered a higher-level ferocious beast, he could also refine a higher-level medicine, such as the Golden Bell liquid, which was most suitable for the skin-strengthening stage. "What's the name of the villa?" Tan Xiu asked. "Seaside Straight Manor," said Gong Dalong with a smile. "When are we going there?" Tan Xiu asked again. "If you have time, we can go there immediately after our ship docks tomorrow," said Gong Dalong quickly. "Then I'll stay in Jingmen Island for 2 more days." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "But I need to rest well on the liner, and I don't want anyone to disturb me." Gong Dalong respectfully said, "Don't worry. We won't let anyone disturb you. Also, you need to tell me your bank account number. I'll transfer the money to your account after the chips are converted into money." Alright. Tan Xiu sent his bank account number to Gong Dalong via his mobile phone and then left the VIP private room under the watchful eyes of many people. However, he didn't go back to his room but went to the stern deck where there were few guests. Overlooking the turbulent sea and feeling the cool breeze, a comfortable feeling spontaneously arose in his heart. Recently, he had always been busy running around for all kinds of things. He rarely had free time to think about what to do next. Moreover, he didn't like the fact that there seemed to be a pair of invisible hands pulling him forward. There were a lot of things that he couldn't control. If I can return to my peak, the heavenly Tao of this world will be nothing but a fart. The coldness in Tan Xiu's eyes faded away as he felt somewhat helpless inside. "It's very quiet here." An abrupt voice sounded behind Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu turned his head and found that it turned out to be the owner of the Paradise Club, Ouyang Lulu. Looking at the girl who was only a few years older than him, with a smile on her face, Tan Xiu said indifferently, "Indeed, it's good." Ouyang Lulu looked at Tan Xiu and said with a smile, "Congratulations on winning the bet." Tan Xiu shook his head and didn't speak again. He didn't want to be disturbed at the moment, but Ouyang Lulu came over, which made him feel somewhat helpless inside. If it wasn't because of Ouyang Lulu's identity, he really wanted to drive her away immediately. "You don't welcome me?" Ouyang Lulu, who had an exquisite heart, was keenly aware of Tan Xiu's attitude and immediately asked. "I just want to be alone for a while," Tan Xiu said indifferently. Ouyang Lulu was annoyed. Ever since she was a child, she had encountered countless men who threw themselves at her wave after wave. Even if those men pretended to reject her, but in their hearts, they couldn't wait to take her as their own. However, the feeling she got from Tan Xiu was that he really didn't want her to be here. It was as if he didn't have the slightest interest in her. "Hey, are you still a man or not?" Ouyang Lulu was annoyed and said something very rashly. However, after saying that, she realized that she had lost control of herself and secretly regretted it. Tan Xiu looked at Ouyang Lulu with an indifferent expression and said indifferently, "Do you really want to try whether I'm a man or not? I don't mind having a one-night stand without any responsibility." "You?" Ouyang Lulu was furious. Looking at Tan Xiu's indifferent face, she almost wanted to lift her foot and fiercely kick Tan Xiu's face. However, realizing her own combat prowess, she took a deep breath and turned to leave. A few hours later, Tan Xiu, who had returned to his room, received a text message on his mobile. His bank account had received a sum of 250 million yuan. It seems that Jia Ruidao and his disciple keep their promise. This huge sum of money didn't have the slightest ripple in Tan Xiu's heart. For him, money was only an auxiliary for his cultivation. If he didn't need money to buy a lot of things, he really didn't care whether he had money or not. Even if it was a mountain of gold and silver, he wouldn't even glance at it. Paradise Club, inside the general manager's office. Ouyang Lulu angrily sat on the boss's chair and smashed the teacup under her feet. Never in her wildest dreams did she think that after she found Tan Xiu's trace through the surveillance video, she would unexpectedly be ignored by the opposite party. He was so young, yet he actually thought of such a disgusting thing. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. Men are really nothing good. Ouyang Lulu secretly muttered in her heart. Knock knock. The door was knocked. "Come in." Ouyang Lulu quickly adjusted her mood and said. The door was pushed open as Chu Yi and Bai Tao came into the office with a beaming smile. They casually sat on the sofa in the corner of the office. Looking at Ouyang Lulu personally pouring tea for them, Bai Tao asked with a smile, "Old classmate, you've learned something new today, right? We've said before that Tan Xiu is absolutely unfathomable. But I didn't expect that he would win so easily in today's bet." While making tea, Ouyang Lulu lightly said, "He does have some ability, but he's too arrogant and rude. I don't like this kind of person." Chu Yi grinned and said, "I say, great beauty Lulu, it doesn't matter if you like him or not. I'm afraid there are a lot of women who like him. Didn't you notice that many young and beautiful women who were watching the bet today looked at Tan Xiu with eyes full of hot feelings?" Ouyang Lulu coldly snorted and said, "Can those women be compared with me?" Chu Yi stared blankly for a moment before he couldn't help laughing and said, "You're right. If you're a fresh flower, then they're just green foxtail grass. There's no way for you to be compared. However, listening to your tone, it seems that you've met with Tan Xiu alone?" Ouyang Lulu snappily said, "I've indeed met him, but I was blasted back by that bastard. I just found that you men are really shameless. That Tan Xiu is the epitome of shamelessness." Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at each other in dismay. A strong interest rose in their hearts at the same time. "Old classmate, what did Tan Xiu do to you?" Bai Tao curiously asked. "Yeah, that Tan Xiu wouldn't be so daring as to do anything to you, would he?" Chu Yi hurriedly asked. Ouyang Lulu rolled her eyes at them and snappily said, "He dares." Subsequently, she narrated the whole story of her meeting with Tan Xiu from beginning to end. Finally, she indignantly said, "Tell me, is he still a man? This great ant is as beautiful as a flower, a national beauty. Other men are eager to get close to me. But that Tan Xiu unexpectedly dared to drive this great ant back. It's really preposterous. If I had some martial arts, I would have taught him a lesson at that time." "Don't." Bai Tao quickly said. Chu Yi also quickly said, I say, old classmate, teaching Tan Xiu a lesson is something you can only think about in your heart. Don't really take action. You don't know that Tan Xiu is very powerful. Looking at their panicked reaction, Ouyang Lulu was confused and asked, What's wrong with you? Even if that Tan Xiu is powerful, he only has 2 arms and 2 legs. Is it possible that he has 3 heads and 6 arms? Chu Yi forced a smile and said, I'm afraid that Tan Xiu is more powerful than having 3 heads and 6 arms. You're the local bully of Jingmen Island, so you should have heard of the Everlasting Feast Hall, right? Of course I know. I've also met the little boss of the Everlasting Feast Hall. We've had a meal together, drank wine, and chatted. Why do you ask? Ouyang Lulu said. Chapter 93. Chu Yi looked deeply at Ouyang Lulu and said in a deep voice, Old classmate, your Ouyang family should be one of the best in Jingmen Island in terms of strength, and your intelligence network should be unparalleled. I think you should have heard about what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall last night, right? Of course I have. What do you mean? Ouyang Lulu was surprised. Chu Yi said, Last night, 3 experts tried to break through the 1,000 Revolution Array in the Everlasting Feast Hall. One of them was Tan Xiu, and he's the one who broke through the 6th layer of the 1,000 Revolution Array. What? Ouyang Lulu abruptly stood up. The teacup in her hand fell midair, spilling the tea inside. The Everlasting Feast Hall was located in Jingmen Island. She and the restaurant's little boss, Gu Xiaoxue, were friends for nearly 10 years. Although their relationship was not as close as bosom friends, it could be said that they appreciated each other. She knew about the 1,000 Revolution Array, and she also knew that only powerful cultivators could break through it. If it was an ordinary person, they would most likely lose their life inside. A cultivator? Tan Xiu is a cultivator? Ouyang Lulu was shocked like a tidal wave. The news caught her unprepared. Of course, what shocked her the most was not only Tan Xiu's identity as a cultivator, but also the fact that Tan Xiu actually broke through the 6th layer of the 1,000 Revolution Array. The 6th layer. How terrifying was his strength to be able to do that? It seemed that no one had been able to break through the 6th layer of the 1,000 Revolution Array for decades. Looking at the shocked Ouyang Lulu, Chu Yi forced a smile and said, Old classmate, now you should understand why I stopped you, right? I can't see through that guy, but I'm sure that he's very powerful. So powerful that it makes one's hair stand on end. So, don't provoke him. This kind of person can only be a friend, not an enemy. Ouyang Lulu's sensual red lips squirmed a few times. Finally, she forced a smile and said, You're right. If we really provoke such a fearful expert, let alone me, I'm afraid our entire Ouyang family won't be able to withstand it. More than 20 years ago, there was a big family in the Northwest. Because one of their clansmen provoked a terrifying expert, the whole family was killed overnight. Chu Yi said in surprise, You even know this kind of thing? Wasn't this matter suppressed by the country's bigwigs and not leaked out? Ouyang Lulu whispered, My granduncle was the one who handled this matter in the past. Your granduncle is that big shot? Chu Yi and Bai Tao exclaimed in unison. Ouyang Lulu waved her hand and said, What are you thinking? What was that big shot surname? What's our last name? What I mean is that the boss sent my granduncle to take care of the funeral. I see. Chu Yi and Bai Tao suddenly understood. Ouyang Lulu said, I really don't understand how Jia Ruidao knows such a powerful person. That Tan Xiu is already so powerful at such a young age. How terrifying must the cultivation of his seniors be? Sect elders? Cultivation? Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at Ouyang Lulu with puzzlement. Ouyang Lulu rolled her eyes at the two and said, Haven't you realized that Tan Xiu is a cultivator? Don't tell me that with your family background and information channels, you don't know the existence of cultivators in this world. Chu Yi and Bai Tao were directly petrified. Cultivators. They had heard of such people, but they had never seen one before. Regarding such legendary figures, they had always thought that it was a blessing to meet them, and that it was normal to not meet them. But at this moment, Ouyang Lulu said that Tan Xiu was a cultivator, and it set off a monstrous wave in their hearts. However, the two of them carefully thought about it. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that Ouyang Lulu was right. Tan Xiu was so powerful. If he was not a cultivator, how could a normal person do such a heaven-defying thing? This won't do. We must immediately find someone to investigate Tan Xiu and see what he needs. If we can't make friends with him while he's young, then once he grows up, I'm afraid it will be extremely difficult for us to make friends with him again. Chu Yi spoke with a resolute and decisive tone. Bai Tao also nodded and said, I'll immediately send the news back to the family. Even if we have to use the entire family's connections, we must find out what Tan Xiu likes and dislikes. Even if we can't become Tang Xiu's real friend, we still have to think of a way to make him owe us a big favor. Right? Chu Yi nodded heavily. Ouyang Lulu looked at the two's solemn expression as her mind raced. After she had guessed Tan Xiu's true identity, how could she not have the same idea? After a night of drifting, the luxury liner finally docked at Jingmen Island's port at noon the next day. As the guests left, Tan Xiu and Jia Ruidao, master and disciple, leisurely left the liner. When it was almost lunchtime, the five of them didn't stop and drove to the seaside Strait Manor. When they were at sea, Gong Dalong had called and booked a private box, so the five of them decided to have lunch at the seaside Strait Manor, Jingmen Island's west coast, in a majestic and large-scale villa district. This was the location of the seaside Strait Manor. 2 cars arrived at the entrance and were strictly inspected before they were allowed to pass. What made Tan Xiu surprised was that there were a lot of security personnel in the manor. Patrols could be seen everywhere, and each and every one of these security personnel had a strong build and steady footsteps. It was obvious that they were martial artists. What's the origin of this seaside Strait Manor? Tan Xiu, who was sitting in the back seat, looked at Jia Ruidao in the front passenger seat and asked. Jia Ruidao said, I don't know the specific origin. However, I know that the owner of the seaside Strait Manor is from the imperial capital. He has been operating here for more than 20 years and has a huge influence. However, in recent years, because the owner of the seaside Strait Manor is old and his health is not very good, his son, Tang Dong, is in charge of the overall situation of the manor. Tan Xiu nodded and said with great interest, I'd like to meet the old owner of the manor. Maybe we can talk about some common topics. Jia Ruidao couldn't help laughing and said, Brother Tang, I'm afraid it's not easy to meet the old owner of the manor. I don't know how many dignitaries in the entire Jingmen Island want to visit him, but all of them are rejected at the door. I once heard that a big shot in Jingmen Island who wants to meet the old owner of the manor has to make an appointment for half a month in advance, only to get the opportunity to receive him for half an hour. He's so arrogant? Tan Xiu was surprised. Jia Ruidao said with a smile, It's not that he's arrogant, but his background is big enough, so he's very unyielding. In fact, I can guess his origin, but I'm not 100% sure. Tan Xiu asked doubtfully, Tell me about your guess. Jia Ruidao said, He's surnamed Tang, and there's only one big family surnamed Tang in the imperial capital. Tan Xiu said, Is this big family in the imperial capital very powerful? Jia Ruidao replied without hesitation, It's more than powerful, it's terrifying. In the entire country, there are no more than 5 big families that are more powerful than the Tang family. Think about it. In a dignified country with a population of 4 to 5 billion, there are no more than 5 families that are more powerful than the Tang family. How strong is this Tang family? Yes, it's indeed very strong. Tan Xiu nodded and said. After entering the manor, 2 cars stopped in the spacious parking lot. Immediately, 4 middle-aged men in suits strode forward and quickly opened the door for everyone. Welcome. A middle-aged man wearing glasses seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. His eyes flashed and said with a smile. Jia Ruidao was surprised. Chief Hu? Why did you come personally? Hu Xinyu said with a smile. I heard Grandmaster Jia has returned triumphantly from the Paradise Club, so I naturally came out to greet you. Moreover, I also came to pay my respects to that powerful gambling Grandmaster. Jia Ruidao smiled and introduced, Chief Hu, you got the news really fast. Let me introduce you. This is Brother Tang who helped me win the bet, Tan Xiu. Brother Tang, this is the receptionist of the Seaside Strait Manor, Hu Xinyu. Hu Xinyu looked at Tan Xiu. Although he had long received the news that Tan Xiu was young, he never thought that he would be this young. With a bright smile on his face, he quickly extended his hand to greet. "Welcome, Mr. Tang. I've heard about your casino yesterday. If the Paradise Club wasn't at sea, I would have immediately rushed over to learn from you." "You're welcome." Tan Xiu didn't like to socialize, but he didn't want to slap a smiling face. Since someone had warmly welcomed him, he didn't want to give them a face. Hu Xinyu said with a smile, "Everyone, please come with me. Your box has been reserved and the food is also being prepared. You can have your meal soon." Soon, under Hu Xinyu's lead, everyone came to a luxurious European-style villa. After understanding it, Tan Xiu understood that each villa in the seaside straight manor would only entertain a group of guests. "Please wait a moment. I'll immediately order the kitchen to serve the dishes." "Wait." Tan Xiu opened his mouth to stop Hu Xinyu. "Mr. Tang, what can I do for you?" Hu Xinyu asked. Tan Xiu said, "I want to see the old master of your seaside straight manor. I don't know if you can introduce me?" Hu Xinyu hesitated for a moment. After a moment, he forced a smile and said, "Mr. Tang, our old master is old and doesn't care about worldly affairs in recent years. So, I'm afraid I can't do anything about it." Tan Xiu was silent for a moment and then said, "Since I can't see your old master, it shouldn't be a problem for me to see the current manager, Tang Dong, right? I just have a few questions to ask him." Hu Xinyu said, "I'll convey your request to my boss. If he wants to see you, I'll inform you at that time." "Alright," Tan Xiu said. At this moment, a loud voice came from outside the villa. A few seconds later, a figure appeared at the door of the villa's hall. Boundless heavenly venerable, this poor Taoist came uninvited. I hope you can forgive me. Chapter 94. The newcomer was a sage-like old Taoist. He wore a Taoist robe and had his hair combed into a bun. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and wore cloud boots on his feet. There was a faint smile on his thin face. "You are." As the reception manager of the villa, Hu Xinyu immediately stood up and asked when he saw the old Taoist who had taken the liberty to visit. After all, if Jia Ruidao, Tan Xiu, and the others didn't want to see this old Taoist, then he would be responsible for driving this old Taoist out. The old Taoist scanned the others with a scrutinizing gaze and finally stopped on Tan Xiu. With a smile, he said, "This old Taoist hails from the Ziyang Temple in the northwest. My Taoist title is Tao Master Zi. I was invited by someone to Jingmen Island as a guest, and I inadvertently heard about what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall yesterday, so I came to visit Benefactor Tang." Jia Ruidao asked with a sinking tone, "How did you know that Brother Tang is here?" Tao Master Zi said with a smile, "Presumably, you are Benefactor Jia, right? Someone recognized you just now and said that you were with almsgiver Tang yesterday. Therefore, this humble Taoist deduced that this is almsgiver Tang." "I'm Tan Xiu." Tan Xiu nodded. "What business do you have with me?" Tao Master Zi said with a smile, "This poor Taoist wants to invite Benefactor Tang to cooperate with me to break into the Evil Dragon Sea area. I wonder if Benefactor Tang is interested?" Evil Dragon Sea area? Tan Xiu had never heard of this name before. He immediately asked, "Where is the Evil Dragon Sea area? Why do you want to barge into the Evil Dragon Sea region?" Tao Master Zi was surprised. Benefactor Tang doesn't know about the Evil Dragon Sea area? "I don't know." Tan Xiu shook his head. Tao Master Zi said, "The Evil Dragon Sea area is thousands of miles away from Jingmen Island. It's a small channel in the South China Sea. As our Purple Sun Temple is best at refining artifacts, this penniless priest plans to collect some materials from ferocious beasts and a special ore. This penniless priest plans to hunt some ferocious beasts. However, this humble Taoist knows that his strength is meager. If he were to go alone, it would be very difficult for him to escape unscathed. Therefore, I heard that Benefactor Tang's cultivation is extremely high, so I wanted to invite you to go with me." Evil Dragon Sea area? Kill berserk beasts? Looking for special ores? Tan Xiu was shocked and immediately asked, "When are we leaving? Is it really just the two of us?" Tao Master Zi said with a smile, It seems Benefactor Tang has agreed. That's right, just the two of us. This poor Taoist would like to invite a few more people, but this poor Taoist has very few connections. Moreover, this poor Taoist is on Jingmen Island, so there is no way for me to invite people of the same Tao. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment. Two faces appeared in his mind. They were Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong. He was considering whether he should invite the two of them along. Others might not know about him, but he was well aware of it. Currently, he only had the strength of the first layer of Star's tyrannical body at the peak of Qi refining realm. If he were to fight with experts like Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong, perhaps he would be killed in an instant. One more helper meant one more chance of survival. Tan Xiu made a decision in his heart and said, since Tao Master Z can't invite others, then I'll invite two people. To be honest, I also need materials from the dire beasts. Once I invite them, we can split our harvest equally between the four of us. How about it? Tao Master Z slightly hesitated before he nodded and said with a smile, then I'll have to trouble Benefactor Tang. Tan Xiu grabbed his mobile and pulled out the business card that Miao Wentong gave him. Then he dialed the phone number on it. At this moment, Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin were staying in a 5-star hotel, talking about what happened in the Paradise Club. As Xiao Mingjin listened to Miao Wentong's vivid speech, he secretly regretted that he didn't come to watch the fight. That Yi Taifu's loss is not unjust. Comparing eyesight and speed with a cultivator, he's just asking for trouble. However, Tang Xiu's style of doing things was really hard to fathom. A dignified cultivator unexpectedly ran to help others gamble. What an interesting young man. Xiao Mingjin said with a chuckle. Miao Wentong said with a smile, that's right. A cultivator cultivates his mind and temperament, and strives to improve his cultivation. This is the first time I've come across a cultivator who participated in gambling. However, because of the previous conflict, I apologize to Tan Xiu. If he doesn't forgive me, I can't do anything about it. Xiao Mingjin shook his head and said, I think Tan Xiu isn't a narrow-minded person. Since you've apologized, I think he won't take the previous matter to heart. I hope so. Miao Wentong said with a wry smile. Xiao Mingjin no longer mentioned the topic about Tan Xiu. He changed the topic and said, Brother Miao, the annual Bauhinia auction is tonight. Can you get the tickets? I actually have two purposes in coming to Jingmen Island. The first is to break through the 1,000 revolution array, and the second is to participate in the Bauhinia auction. Miao Wentong said with a smile, actually, I also have this purpose. Coincidentally, some friends in the business world in Jingmen Island gave me several tickets yesterday. Let's go together in the evening. However, I have to say something first. This time, I've prepared a lot of money to buy a few things I need. Xiao Mingjin said with a smile, I won't compete with you maliciously. But I'll go all out for the things I need. After all, the annual Bauhinia auction is not a lot of useful things for us cultivators. I understand. Miao Wentong nodded and said, ring, ring, ring. His cell phone rang, interrupting their chat. Miao Wentong took out his cell phone and looked at the caller ID. It was an unfamiliar number. According to his previous habit, he wanted to directly hang up the call. However, when Tan Xiu's appearance appeared in his mind, he immediately changed his mind. He pressed the answer button and said, I'm Miao Wentong. Who are you? I'm Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu's voice came from the phone. Miao Wentong's pupils shrunk. A happy expression suddenly appeared on his face as he quickly asked, Mr. Tang, is there something you need from me? There is. A Taoist who claims to be Tao Master Z invited me to the Evil Dragon Sea area to hunt fierce beasts. I want to ask if you're interested? Miao Wentong quickly looked at Xiao Mingjin and said with a sinking tone, I know Tao Master Z. I've known him for more than 20 years. I'm very interested. I wonder if I can bring one more person with me? It just so happens that Xiao Mingjin is also here. All right, Tan Xiu said. Miao Wentong asked, when will it be sent out? Where shall we meet? Tan Xiu said, if you can, come to the Seaside Straight Manor now. After you arrive here, look for Manager Husinyu. He'll take you there. All right. We'll immediately catch up. The call ended. Miao Wentong repeated Tan Xiu's words and grinned. Brother Xiao, It seems that Tan Xiu is really a broad-minded person. He invited us to the Evil Dragon Sea area to hunt fierce beasts. I think this is a good opportunity for us to make friends with him. Xiao Mingjun stood up and said with a smile, "It's indeed a heaven-sent opportunity. However, the Evil Dragon Sea area is full of dangers, so we must be very careful. Let's go." But in the Seaside Straight Manor Villa, Tan Xiu put away his mobile as he looked at Dao Master Z and said, "Let's have a meal together. I believe that the two people I invited will also arrive soon. I don't have much time. Since we've reached an agreement, we'll immediately leave after they arrive." Dao Master Z said with a smile, "I didn't expect that Benefactor Tang would be so swift and decisive. This poor Taoist admires you. Then this poor Taoist will respectfully accept." Jiao Dao looked at Dao Master Z and then looked at Tan Xiu. He found that he seemed to have seen a special circle, and he simply couldn't squeeze into this circle. However, he was an extremely tactful person, so he immediately warmly welcomed Dao Master Z to take a seat. The lunch was very sumptuous. It was so sumptuous that even Tan Xiu felt that it was somewhat extravagant. At the same time, his heart was filled with helplessness. For example, the two main dishes were made from good quality fierce beast's meat. If he were to give these fierce beast's meat to him, he would definitely be able to use it as the main material to refine the Golden Bell liquid. What a pity! The spiritual power in the meat has been completely consumed, and it won't be of much benefit to the body. Amidst Tan Xiu's sigh, the lunch was finished. Jiao Dao wanted to spend more time with Tan Xiu, but he knew that Tan Xiu had something to do later, so he got up and left with his 3 disciples. Tan Xiu didn't urge him to stay. He didn't even say any polite words as he quietly watched Jiao Dao leave. "Benefactor Tang, this poor Taoist heard that you broke through the 1,000 revolution array in the Everlasting Feast Hall. It's really amazing. To tell you the truth, this poor Taoist has also broken through the 1,000 revolution array of the Everlasting Feast Hall. But unfortunately, this poor Taoist's cultivation is limited. I could only break through the 3rd layer and had no choice but to withdraw." Dao Master Z said while holding his horsetail whisk while sitting face to face with Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "My cultivation is very low, and my strength is also very weak. However, I know a lot about arrays, so breaking arrays is naturally more powerful than the average cultivators. When we arrive at the Evil Dragon Sea area, I'm afraid I won't be able to help much when it comes to hunting high-level fierce beasts." Dao Master Z was startled. He was silent for a while before he solemnly said, "Benefactor Tang, don't belittle yourself. In my eyes, a formation master is far stronger than a martial cultivator with a powerful cultivation base. When the time comes, Benefactor Tang only needs to arrange the killing array, and we will be responsible for leading the fierce beasts into the array. When the time comes, it will be much easier to hunt them." Tan Xiu thought about it and understood Dao Master Z's meaning. He nodded and said, "Arranging the array is not a problem, but I need some materials." "What materials?" Dao Master Z asked. Tan Xiu said, "Jades. The better the quality of the jades, the better the array I can arrange. In addition, I also need to engrave some talismans which will be used when arranging the array." Dao Master Z said with a smile, "These are trivial matters. This poor Taoist has a friend in Jingmen Island who runs a jade business. So be it. This poor Taoist will contact him now and ask him to send you the jades you need as soon as possible. As for the talismans, I can only trouble Benefactor Tang." "No problem." Tan Xiu continued, "To engrave the talismans, I need to buy some things. So be it. You wait here for the 2 people I invited, I'll go buy some things. After I come back and engrave the talismans, we'll immediately set off." Alright. Chapter 95. Just as Tan Xiu walked out of the villa's hall, a middle-aged man walked into the courtyard. He had a square face, a well-proportioned build, and a pair of bright and spirited eyes. "Who are you looking for?" "I'm looking for Tan Xiu." Tan Xiu raised his brows as he sized him up and said, "I'm Tan Xiu. Who are you?" "I'm Tang Dong. I heard you want to see me?" At the same time, Tang Dong was also sizing up Tan Xiu with a puzzled expression. He couldn't understand why this young man, whose fame had spread far and wide in Jingmen Island in the past 2 days, wanted to see him. Tan Xiu nodded and said, "That's right. I originally wanted to see the manor's old master. But I heard that it's very difficult to see him, so I wanted to see you. There's something I need to ask you. How about we find a quiet place?" Tang Dong looked at the villa behind Tan Xiu, turned around and said, "Come with me. There's a villa nearby that specializes in providing tea and drinks. It's generally not open to the public." Quickly, the two of them came to the villa. As the waiter brewed the tea, Tang Dong tasted it and looked at Tan Xiu, asking, "Tell me, what do you want from me?" Tan Xiu said, "I'm interested in the ingredients you used to make the main dish. I wonder if you can tell me where you hunted fierce beasts?" So it turns out to be this matter. In fact, many people know the place where we hunt fierce beasts. There's a trench near Jingmen Island called the Eye of Death. There are some fierce beasts there. Each and every one of them is very fierce, and most of them even have simple spiritual wisdom. Hunting fierce beasts is not easy, is it? Tan Xiu said. Of course it's not easy. Every time we send people to the Eye of Death, some people are injured, and some even died several times. This is also the reason why the food in our seaside strait manor is extremely expensive. With a face full of understanding, Tan Xiu said, "I can see that the security personnel of your manor are all martial artists. If you pay a little more attention and use some weapons, you should be able to hunt fierce beasts. Last question, does your villa have any dire beast corpses for sale?" Tang Dong's brows wrinkled as he asked in puzzlement, "You need the bodies of fierce beasts?" "Yes," Tan Xiu said. Tang Dong shook his head and said, "Our manor does have some fierce beast corpses, but we won't sell them. That's because it's extremely difficult for us to hunt down a vicious beast, and our villa's specialty dish requires the vicious beast's corpse as the main ingredient. Sorry. Tan Xiu was silent for a while and then slowly said, "If I don't need the meat, can you sell me the remaining hairs, claws, scales, bones, blood, and other materials?" Tang Dong curiously asked, "What do you need these things for?" Tan Xiu said calmly, "I know how to set up a formation. I need these things to set up a formation." Tang Dong was surprised. "You know arrays? That kind of chi men dun jia?" Tan Xiu nodded and said, "I believe you already know what I did in the Everlasting Feast Hall. If I didn't know arrays, how could I break through the 6 layers of the 1,000 Revolution array?" Tang Dong patted his forehead and said with a smile, "I'm really smart, but I'm muddle-headed this time. I can sell the things you need to you, but business is business. I want to know how much you can offer me." Tan Xiu thought for a moment and then seriously said, "I'll buy the remaining hairs, claws, scales, bones, or other things from any fierce beast for 5 million. How about it? 5 million? Tang Dong stared at Tan Xiu with a dumbfounded expression. Never in his dreams did he expect that Tan Xiu would give such a high price. It must be noted that apart from the meat, there weren't many other things that could be used in their villa. Even so, the dishes cooked by each fierce beast could only be sold for about 10 million. As for the remaining parts, they sold them at a very low price. "What? You're not satisfied?" Tan Xiu asked with a puzzled expression. Tang Dong repeatedly waved his hand and said, "No, no, no. Of course I'm satisfied. The price you gave is reasonable. We'll make the deal. But when do you need it?" "If you have it now, I can buy it now," said Tan Xiu. Tang Dong immediately got up and seriously said, "It just so happens that our villa has some remaining fierce beast parts. I'll take you there to have a look." "All right." Tan Xiu immediately got up. However, when he followed Tang Dong for a dozen steps, he suddenly remembered that he should buy the materials to inscribe talismans. Immediately, he said, "I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if I can say it." "Say it." Tang Dong said, "I'm going to buy something. Can you send someone to buy it for me?" Tan Xiu said, "It's not expensive. I believe you should be able to buy it by asking outside." Tang Dong said with a smile, "It's a small matter. Just write the things you want to buy on a piece of paper. I'll immediately send someone to buy it. We'll talk about the money later." All right. 10 minutes later, Tan Xiu followed Tang Dong to the kitchen in the depths of the villa. Behind the kitchen was a large warehouse. Inside the warehouse was a large freezer with 2 frozen fierce beast carcasses. Outside was an ordinary space where the dissected fierce beast parts were discarded. There are 4 dissected fierce beasts here that are useless to us. If you're satisfied with them, I can sell them to you according to the price you mentioned. Tang Dong looked at Tan Xiu with some expectation in his heart. After observing for a few minutes, Tan Xiu nodded and said, I want these things. I can transfer the money to you immediately. But can I ask you a favor? Say it. Tang Dong happily said. Tan Xiu said, I came to Star City, but I have to go to the sea for a few days. I don't have the time nor the energy to send these materials back to Star City. I'll give you an address. Can you send someone to send them to me? I'll arrange someone to receive them after you send them there. Tang Dong said with a smile, It's a small matter. The 4 fierce beast materials were worth a total of 20 million yuan. Tan Xiu had recently learned how to transfer money through mobile banking, so he transferred 20 million yuan to Tang Dong. I want all the materials from the dissected fierce beasts that your villa has hunted within half a year. Write down my cell phone number. Send someone to Star City and I'll immediately transfer the money to you. After the transaction, Tan Xiu spoke again. Tang Dong stared blankly for a moment and asked with astonishment, Only half a year? Tan Xiu said, Only half a year. These fierce beasts that you've hunted are all low-level fierce beasts. They'll be useful to me for half a year. But after that, unless you can hunt more powerful fierce beasts, their materials will no longer be useful to me. Tang Dong suddenly understood and said with a smile, Don't worry. Since I only have half a year, I'll naturally send more people to the Eye of Death to hunt a lot of fierce beasts. Tan Xiu nodded and said, If that's the case, then I'll go back to the villa where I dined before. I'll buy the things I need and give the money directly to your people. Tang Dong waved his hand and said, I already know what the things you want to buy are. Those things won't cost much, so forget about the money. He was not a fool. He had already earned a lot of money from Tan Xiu for the materials from the fierce beasts' corpses. He simply didn't care about that small amount of money. He might as well do Tan Xiu a favor and do a few more transactions with Tan Xiu in the future. Alright. Tan Xiu simply agreed and left straight away. Tang Dong squinted his eyes as he looked at Tan Xiu's back. A strange feeling rose inside his heart. The Tan Xiu he was facing was obviously a young man in his 20s. But his behavior and demeanor were not like a young man at all. Instead, he was like a mature and steady person who once had an extremely distinguished status. This feeling made him feel a bit absurd. When Tan Xiu returned to the villa where he dined before, he found that Xiao Mingjun and Miao Weneng had arrived and were chatting with Dao Master Z. Mr. Tang! Mr. Tang! Xiao Mingjun and Miao Weneng got up at the same time. Their tone was a bit cordial. Tan Xiu nodded to the two and said, You need to wait for a moment. I'll send someone to buy the materials needed to inscribe the talisman. It will be delivered soon. After I finish inscribing the talisman, we can set off. Xiao Mingjun and Miao Weneng looked at each other without saying anything. Dao Master Z faintly smiled and said, Benefactor Tang, this poor Taoist didn't expect that the 2 friends you invited turned out to be Benefactor Xiao and Benefactor Miao. This poor Taoist is acquainted with them, but I didn't know that they also came to Jingmen Island. When I was chatting with them, I heard them talking about the Redbud auction. If possible, can we wait until tomorrow to go to the Evil Dragon Sea area? Stalling for time? Tan Xiu frowned. He was a bit unhappy inside. But he didn't show it directly. Instead, he asked, What is the Redbud auction? Miao Weneng quickly explained, The Redbud auction is an annual large-scale auction in the country. At that time, there will be some auction items that are useful to us cultivators. I've participated in the Redbud auction several times. Although I spent a lot of money, the harvest was quite plentiful. If we miss it this time, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for another year. Items useful to cultivators? Tan Xiu pondered for a moment before he slowly said, Such being the case, we'll leave tomorrow. When is the time of the Bauhinia auction? Can I go with you to have a look? Miao Weneng secretly sighed in relief. He was really afraid that Tan Xiu wouldn't agree. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's inquiry, he immediately replied, 2 days ago, my friends in Jingmen Island gave me 4 tickets to the Redbud auction. I originally thought that there will only be me and Brother Xiao, but now with the 2 of you, the tickets are just enough. Tan Xiu said, "That's good. It just so happens that I have some spare money in my hands. I'll go there to see if I can buy some things I need." Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjun glanced at each other. Both of them secretly smiled wryly inside. They wanted to be friends with Tan Xiu. If Tan Xiu took a fancy to the same thing in the auction, they probably wouldn't be able to compete with Tan Xiu. P.S. After 12 o'clock tonight, this book will officially go on the shelves. At that time, Quiet Night will release 10 chapters. Brothers and sisters, please throw your guaranteed monthly tickets to Quiet Night. I'll be very grateful. In addition, after this book goes on the shelves, the update speed will be accelerated. It will absolutely make the brothers and sisters happy. Finally, I'm asking for a recommendation vote. Chapter 96. In the evening, the pale Tan Xiu followed the Miao Wenong trio to the venue of the Bauhinia auction, Jingmen Island International Business Conference Center. On the 18th floor. In the huge auction venue, there were thousands of tables and chairs. 1/3 of the seats were already occupied. Moreover, some people were rushing in from outside. The 4 of them randomly found a place to sit, and as soon as they sat down, the attendant at the auction site presented them with the list of items to be auctioned. Tan Xiu sat on a chair, looking at the pictures and text introduction of the auction items on the list. The list had 3 pages. When he finished reading the first 2 pages, a bit of disappointment appeared in his eyes. Although many of those items were good, but for him, they were simply useless. Opening the last page, Tan Xiu's eyes roughly glanced at the list. However, in an instant, his eyes stagnated, revealing a look of disbelief. Space crack stone? It turned out to be a space crack stone? If this picture was taken correctly, then it was definitely the main material to refine an interspatial ring. Space crack stone. Tang Xiu's heartbeat accelerated in that instant, and a look of determination could be seen in his eyes. Originally, he was a bit worried. Tomorrow, he would go to the Evil Dragon Sea area. If he hunted large ominous beasts or several of them, how would he transport them back? But if he could refine an interspatial ring, transporting them back would absolutely not be a problem. Starting price of 5 million? Each bid must not be less than 500,000? Tan Xiu thought for a moment. He felt that with his current funds, it should not be a problem to bid for this fist-sized space crack stone. In the Paradise Club, he won the bet with Yi Taifu. After deducting the 249 million he gave to Jia Ruidao, he got 250 million. Using it to buy materials from the ominous beasts, he spent 20 million. Now, he had a total of 230 million. The base price of the space crack stone is 5 million. I still have 230 million. It should not be a problem to buy it. If it is not enough, I will borrow money from Jia Ruidao. When I have money, I will return it to him. Tan Xiu secretly thought. Just as Tan Xiu suppressed the surprise in his heart and looked at the list again, he found something useful to him, a 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. If it was in the immortal world, not to mention a 1,000-year wild ginseng, even a 10,000-year wild ginseng wouldn't be lacking. The 1,000-year-old wild ginseng was what he used to feed his spirit beasts. But now it was too precious to him. If he could buy this 1,000-year-old wild ginseng, he would have one more main ingredient to refine the Golden Bell Elixir, and the Golden Bell Elixir would be extremely effective. You must get it. Tan Xiu looked at the price below and was stunned. His eyes were filled with disbelief. 50 million? The base price of this 1,000-year-old ginseng was 50 million. Furthermore, the increment in each bid must not be less than 2 million. Tan Xiu's lips wriggled. If I move all the 1,000-year-old ginseng from my herb garden in the immortal realm, I should be able to buy dozens of earths, right? This price is really a scam. His gaze continued to move downwards, and he discovered that there were a few other items that were useful to cultivators, but not very useful to him. Finally, he locked his eyes on the void crack stone and the 1,000-year-old ginseng. In his heart, he silently calculated how much he would have to pay to get these 2 things. Mr. Tang, what do you fancy? After Xiao Mingjin finished looking at the list in his hand, he turned to look at Tan Xiu sitting next to him and asked in a low voice. Tan Xiu pointed to the void cracked stone and the 1,000-year-old ginseng and said, "I need these two things. Buy them as much as possible." Xiao Mingjin looked at the void cracked stone and was somewhat surprised, because he didn't know what kind of stone it was. The auctioneer only commented, rare or hard material, suspected to be a meteorite from outer space. However, the 1,000-year-old ginseng made him a bit depressed because he also fancied it. Nowadays on Earth, the 1,000-year-old ginseng was very rare. It had simply reached the point of being priceless. Even if some people wanted to buy it with a lot of money, they didn't even hear of the 1,000-year-old ginseng being sold. Moreover, not to mention a 1,000-year-old ginseng, even a 500-year-old wild ginseng was extremely rare and rare nowadays. "Forget it. I'll give it up." Xiao Mingjin secretly sighed inside. He turned around and touched Miao Wenong, telling him about the two items that Tan Xiu was prepared to bid on. Miao Wenong also fancied the 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. But just like Xiao Mingjin, he finally decided to give it up after knowing that Tan Xiu wanted it. As for Dao Master Z, he was purely here to be a bystander. Even if he fancied something, he wouldn't bid. It's not that he didn't want to buy it, but he was poor. He was so poor that he simply couldn't afford it. At 8 o'clock in the evening, along with the appearance of a young woman on the auction stage, the originally noisy auction venue suddenly quieted down. Everyone's gazes were focused on the young lady. Welcome to the annual Chinese Redbud Flower Auction. This year's Bauhinia auction will be held on Jingmen Island. All the items on the auction list have been delivered. I am Xiao Ai, the auctioneer of this year's Bauhinia auction. I believe that everyone has already seen the items that will be auctioned in this year's auction list. I also believe that everyone already has the items that they want to auction. I wish everyone in advance that they will be able to harvest a lot and return with a full load. Next, I announce the official start of the 21st Bauhinia auction. The first item that we will auction is a precious antique. It's a blue and white porcelain vase that was produced in the late Ming and early Qing dynasty. Everyone, do not underestimate this blue and white porcelain vase. The seal on it shows that it was used by the imperial family. It is very likely that it was the residence of the founding emperor of the Qing dynasty. Tan Xiu quietly sat below, listening to the auctioneer's bombastic introduction. After announcing the start of the auction, he looked at the hundreds of guests who came to participate in the Bauhinia auction and competed with each other to bid. A strange feeling emerged in his heart. As the saying goes, gold in troubled times, collection in prosperous times. Now, he deeply understood the true meaning of this sentence. Items were auctioned at high prices. Items were bought at high prices. He couldn't help but sigh. Nowadays, there were many rich people. Moreover, there were even more rich people who loved to collect. Of course, he also had another kind of thought. That is, people are stupid and have a lot of money. It's meaningless to buy a dead object at home. During the 2-hour auction, Tan Xiu didn't bid. On the contrary, Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wenong each bid once and bought the items that they needed. Next, we will auction a rare ore. This rare ore is very hard. It is suspected to be a meteorite that fell on Earth from the outer space. I believe that this is a precious ore with a very high collection value. Perhaps, its future appreciation space will be difficult to estimate. Its starting price is 5 million, and each bid must be no less than 500,000. Now, the bidding begins. The auctioneer held the space crack stone and explained it with great emotion. Then, he announced the start of the bidding. It's coming. Tan Xiu's spirit was shaken. His eyes were firmly locked on the space crack stone. He didn't rush to bid. Because after 2 hours of observation, he found out that only a few of the people who bid sincerely wanted to buy it. They were just throwing a brick to attract jade. If someone tried to snatch it from them, they would immediately give up. If no one tried to snatch it from them, they might be able to spend a small amount of money to buy something that they liked. 6 million. A voice rang out, and that person also raised the token in his hand. 6, 5 million, 7 million, 7, 5 million. Soon, the price of this space crack stone had climbed to 9. 5 million. However, after that person made his bid, no one else made a bid for more than 10 seconds. A sweet smile hung on the auctioneer's face as she said, "That gentleman bid 5 million. Are there any guests who are willing to bid higher? Everyone, please don't underestimate this rare ore. It's mysterious. Perhaps one day in the future, its value will soar by 10 times or even 20 times compared to now. 10 million. As the auctioneer's voice fell, another voice sounded. Tan Xiu took a deep breath, raised his card and said, 10. 5 million. 15 million. That voice sounded again. Tan Xiu raised his card and shouted, 20 million. Wow! Everyone in the auction venue turned their heads to look at Tang Xiu one after another, and discussions broke out one after another. Who's so rich that he's stupid? A piece of ore of unknown use, even if it's a little rare, shouldn't be worth 20 million. Could it be that he was fooled by the auctioneer and wants to get rich quickly? 20 million for a piece of ore? What kind of joke is this? I think 10 million is high enough. These days, the rich really don't care about money. It's a young man. I wonder which family's prodigal he's from. If I had such a junior, I'd definitely break his legs and make him stay at home to ponder over his mistakes. Could it be that that young man has taken a fancy to the auctioneer? Is he trying to show off in front of her? How interesting. Tan Xiu's hearing was very sharp. He could clearly hear the discussions in the auction, but he still maintained an indifferent expression. He could not be bothered with those who failed to recognize the value of the sky-crack stone. Of course, he would not tell everyone the use of the sky-crack stone. After all, the sky-crack stone was a treasure in his hands, but in the hands of those who did not know how to refine a space ring, it was just a hard stone. The auctioneer looked deeply at Tan Xiu and asked with a smile, "That handsome guy has bid 20 million. Is there anyone who wants to bid higher than 20 million? If there isn't, this precious and rare ore will belong to that handsome guy." There was silence in the auction hall. Just as the auctioneer was about to announce that Tan Xiu had won the bid for the sky-crack stone, a voice suddenly sounded. 50 million. P.S. I'll be on the shelves after midnight, and then I'll have to face a month-long battle for the monthly votes. I'm feeling a little nervous, so I hope my brothers and sisters can accompany me to fight for the monthly votes. Brothers and sisters, have you prepared your guaranteed monthly votes? Chapter 97. Everyone in the auction venue was shocked by the sudden voice. Even Tan Xiu, who regarded money as dirt, did not expect that in this era where almost no one could recognize the space-cracking stone, there would be someone willing to buy it at such a high price. Tang Xiu looked toward the source of the voice and found that the guest who quoted the price was an old man in a black Chinese tunic suit. He had a full head of white hair and a kind countenance, looking like a benevolent old man. However, facing everyone's gaze, he showed a complacent look. Especially when he found that Tan Xiu was looking at him, he raised his chin and gave Tan Xiu a provocative look. This is troublesome. Tan Xiu sighed in his heart and raised his bidding card again. 60 million. Wow, the whole auction venue was boiling. Everyone's eyes were wandering between Tan Xiu and the old man. As the saying went, there must be something wrong when something is abnormal. Some quick-witted people were already secretly guessing, is that rare or really a treasure? However, guessing was just guessing, but no one fought for it. The reason was very simple. Even if that ore was precious, they did not know it at all. If it became worthless after they bought it, they would really be the biggest spendthrift. Moreover, the old man who bid for it looked a little ugly, but he did not make another bid. Tan Xiu looked at the old man in the distance with a frozen smile on his face. His face was even uglier than when his father died and his mother got married. He found that the old man's lips moved several times, wanting to make a bid, but he finally stopped. What's going on? Tan Xiu originally wanted to spend a lot, but he did not expect that the other party would stop. The auctioneer's eyes flashed with excitement, and he said in an encouraging tone, "There is a saying that the eyes of the masses are as bright as snow. Let me quote a saying, don't miss a thing when you pass by. If this ore is not a rare treasure, who would auction it at such a high price? I am very lucky and happy to be able to see a powerful person with a keen eye who can identify a treasure. That handsome gentleman bids 60 million. Is there a higher price? If not, this rare treasure will belong to that mister. Anything else? As the auctioneer finished his speech, the discussions in the auction hall became silent. Everyone's eyes lingered on Tang Xiu and the old man. They were very curious. Would the old man make another bid? In fact, some of them were already prepared to fight over the old man if he were to make another bid. Just as the auctioneer said, "Don't miss it." What if the ore was really a rare treasure, even if they didn't recognize it now, they could buy it and study it slowly. Maybe they would get a huge surprise. However, to the disappointment of many people, the old man did not make another bid. The auctioneer felt a little regretful, but she was still very excited. She didn't expect this or to fetch a high price. As an auctioneer, she could get a 10,000th commission for every item sold. Now that this item had been auctioned for 60 million, she had easily gained some unexpected wealth. I hereby announce that this precious ore has been obtained by that gentleman. You can go backstage to do the transaction now, or you can go backstage to do the transaction after the auction ends. Tan Xiu did not hesitate and immediately rushed backstage. The void crack stone was a precious ore that he urgently needed, so he must get his hands on it as soon as possible. Acceptance. Payment. The transaction went smoothly. Soon, Tan Xiu returned to his seat in the auction hall with the void crack stone. A smile hung on the corner of Miao Wentong's mouth. Although his heart was full of confusion, he didn't understand why Tan Xiu wanted to buy that ore. But this was Tan Xiu's privacy, so he didn't ask much. Instead, he smiled and said in a low voice, "Congratulations to Mr. Tang for obtaining a treasure." Tan Xiu nodded. He hesitated for a moment and then said, "Call me something else later. Just call me Tan Xiu. I'll also call you by your name." Miao Wenong looked at Tan Xiu's indifferent expression and secretly smiled wryly inside. The auction of the items proceeded very quickly. Tan Xiu also admired the auctioneer's eloquence. Many of the items were originally not worth much, but her witty words stirred many people's emotions and made them generously bid, causing the price of the items to rise steadily. Talent. This word suddenly emerged in Tan Xiu's mind. In the early hours of the morning, the auction was about to come to an end. It was also the last highlight of this auction. The next item is the penultimate item of this auction. It's also the treasure that countless people are paying attention to, the Millennium Ginseng. As we all know, with the rapid development of science and technology, it's very difficult to obtain a real wild ginseng in this era where forests and mountains are heavily exploited. And a Millennium Ginseng is even rarer than a phoenix feather and a unicorn horn. Who can get such a treasure tonight? I hereby announce that the auction begins. The auctioneer, Xiao Ai, stepped back a step after she finished speaking, indicating that she would hand over the auction stage to the guests below. 60 million. 70 million. 75 million. 80 million. Tan Xiu didn't rush to participate. He was waiting for the final competition. However, the price kept rising. In just 2 minutes, it had risen to 180 million. This price was not something that he could buy with his current funds. "I'm still short of 10 million, but I'm afraid it will be far more than this amount. Do I really need to borrow money from Jia Ruidao? Jia Ruidao will get 250 million, plus his capital. It should be more than 300 million. But he still owes a lot of debt. After paying off the debt, I'm afraid there won't be much left." Tan Xiu's mind was racing. He was hesitating whether he should borrow money from Jia Ruidao or not. Moreover, it was easy to borrow money, but would it be difficult to pay it back? After all, it was a capital of hundreds of millions. Even if he could invite Kang Xia to work for him, even if he wanted to set up a company to make money, how long would it take to earn hundreds of millions? How long would it take to pay off Jia Ruidao's debt? Half a minute later, Tan Xiu made a decision in his mind: borrow it. He believed in his own ability, and he didn't want to miss this Millennium Ginseng. Tan Xiu left his seat and went to the last corner of the auction hall to make a phone call. As a result, he learned that Jia Ruidao had paid off his debt of 220 million, leaving him with 80 million. Tan Xiu didn't hesitate and directly borrowed the 80 million. Ding! A few minutes later, He received a text message on his phone. 80 million had been transferred to his bank account. 218 million, is there any higher bidder? If not, this millennium ginseng will belong to that gentleman. The auctioneer looked excited as he loudly asked. Tan Xiu looked at the silent guests around him. He slowly raised the paddle in his hand and said, 220 million. The auctioneer, Xiao Ai's eyes lit up as she said with a smile, sure enough, heroes come from the youth. This handsome gentleman has bid 220 million, which is really a big move. Today's scene reminds me of a saying, heroes come from the youth, and the older ginger is no longer the spicier. I don't think anyone can bid higher than this handsome gentleman, right? If not, this millennium ginseng will belong to this handsome gentleman. Many people in the auction hall revealed an angry look. They recognized the saying, heroes come from the youth, but the saying, the older ginger is no longer the spicier, made many people angry. In the front row, a fat middle-aged man, who was snuggling up to a young girl, pulled the gold chain around his neck. He raised the Vacheron Constantin watch on his wrist, which was worth millions, and said with a gruff voice, 230 million. 250 million. A cold light burst out from Tan Xiu's eyes as he shouted in a deep voice. The fat middle-aged man pushed away the young boy next to him, turned his head and stared fiercely at Tan Xiu. He then raised his middle finger and shouted, 300 million. Wow, everyone in the auction hall was shocked by the fat middle-aged man's bid. 300 million? A millennium ginseng was auctioned at a sky-high price of 300 million? Everyone began to whisper to each other. What's the background of this stupid fatty? How could he take out 300 million to bid for a millennium ginseng? I definitely think that the food he ate only grew meat, not brains. The price of a millennium ginseng is at most 150 million. Any more than that and he's a fool. Stupid, even if this millennium ginseng is precious, it's not worth 300 million, right? He's obviously competing with that young man. Idiot. There are idiots every year, but this year there are especially many. That damn fatty has money to burn, right? Stupid people with lots of money. Tan Xiu squinted his eyes as he looked at the provocative eyes of the fat middle-aged man. He secretly sighed inside. He couldn't afford it. He could only bid 250 million. Any more and he couldn't afford it. If it's in your life, you'll get it. If it's not in your life, don't force it. This sentence emerged in Tan Xiu's mind as he finally smiled bitterly. He used to be very rich. As long as he fancied something, there was almost nothing he couldn't buy. Therefore, he was very clear about the power of money. But now, he had to start all over again and was seriously short of funds. In the end, the millennium ginseng was obtained by the fat middle-aged man. The show is about to start. Miao Wending, who was sitting next to Tan Xiu, was a bit excited as he whispered. Tan Xiu was surprised. The millennium ginseng is the most expensive item on the auction list. It should be the last one, right? Is there anything else that's not on the list? Miao Wendong whispered, Mr. Tang? Tan Xiu, you haven't participated in the Bauhinia auction before, so you don't know its rules. In every auction, there will be an item that's not on the list as the finale. I see. Tan Xiu was suddenly enlightened. He had some expectations for this last item. He didn't get the millennium ginseng. He didn't spend the money in his hand. Maybe the last item was what he needed. Suddenly, the lights in the auction venue were all turned off. Then, a beam of dim white light shone on the auctioneer from the top. Finally, on the wall behind the auctioneer, the projector projected an image. Chapter 98. In the gloomy auction venue, pairs of eyes were glued to the projector screen. It was a video. In the vast sea with turbulent waves, the islands were scattered like stars in the sky, like inlaid gems. A soaring eagle swooped down toward an isolated island. The isolated island was very large, tens of square kilometers in area. Undulating mountains, lush trees, beautiful birdsong, fragrant flowers, and colorful butterflies frolicking on the peaks. At the highest peak in the center of the island was a majestic castle full of European style. The flat road branched into 3 roads at the top of the mountain. One led to the castle, one led to the nearby parking lot, and the last one led to the helipad. Looking at the isolated island from above, one would be surprised to find that there were 9 hills extending thousands of meters into the sea. At the end of each hill was a European-style pavilion. Following the mountain path down to the sea, there was a private pier where passenger ships were anchored. 9 dragons spitting pearl? How is this possible? Tan Xiu's pupils shrunk and his eyes were filled with disbelief. His body slightly trembled at this moment, and his heart was like a raging storm. He once had an excellent feng shui treasure land when he was in the immortal world. The heaven and earth spiritual qi there was rich, and the spiritual energy in the earth vein was abundant. Cultivating there would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort. And that place was called the 9 Dragons Spitting Pearl Secret Domain. The video ended. The lights in the auction venue were turned on again. The auctioneer smiled and said, "This video is the last item for today's auction. It's 9 Dragons Island in the Pacific Ocean, and its neighboring island is South Bird Island. The distance between the two is 2,000 nautical miles. This private island was originally owned by the owner of a European consortium. But unfortunately, the island has just been developed for 2.5 years, and the owner of the consortium had to sell it due to special reasons. It just so happens that the big boss of our auction has a good relationship with the owner of the island, so he entrusted the auction to us. The guests who are qualified to participate in the Bauhinia auction are the real tycoons in the country. I'm sure many people will be interested in this feng shui treasure land. So, I won't waste any more time. The auction of this private island will now begin. Its base price is 500 million, and each increment must be no less than 10 million. The bidding begins now." As the auctioneer's voice fell, the hundreds of people participating in the auction below started whispering. After all, this was a transaction worth at least 500 million. Although they were all very rich, 500 million was not a small amount to them. "This island is not bad." Miao Wenong had a smile on his face, but he had no intention of bidding. He glanced at Tan Xiu and then turned his head to another direction. He looked at Xiao Mingjin and asked with a smile, "If I remember correctly, you're planning to buy a house abroad. How was it? Are you interested?" Xiao Mingjin was silent for a moment. He slowly shook his head and said, "The base price of this private island is indeed not high. If he could get it for 500 million, he would be able to make some money even if he sold it after buying it. But everyone knows this problem. So, I think even 1 billion won't necessarily be enough to buy it. I'm not a tycoon, so I can't compare to you. So, I'll start being a bystander." Miao Wenong couldn't help laughing and said, "If you really want to buy it, I can lend it to you. I can't take out more than that, but 1 billion is still within my means." Xiao Mingjin said with a smile, "I'll take a look first." Tan Xiu stood up and walked to the back corner of the auction venue. He then dialed a cell number. Star City. Chen Jizhong, who had just bought a villa in Southgate Town, was sitting cross-legged in the study room as he earnestly practiced the cultivation technique taught to him by Tang Xiu. He used to be a cultivator, but what he cultivated was true qi, which was very different from immortal cultivation techniques. However, there were thousands of great Daos, but all roads lead to the same destination. Because of his previous foundation, he was working hard to transform his true qi into true essence. Ring, ring, ring. His cell phone suddenly rang, causing Chen Jizhong to wake up from his cultivation. Suddenly, an angry expression appeared on his face. He grabbed the cell phone and looked at the caller ID. The angry expression on his face instantly disappeared without a trace and was replaced with a bit of respect as he pressed the answer button. "Master, are you looking for me? I need money. The more the better. How much money can you transfer in 10 minutes? Chen Jizhong was silent for half a minute. His mind was constantly thinking. After half a minute, he said, "About 3 billion. Time is too tight. If you can give me half a day, I can get 5 billion or even more." Tan Xiu said, "I'll give you my account number. 10 minutes later, transfer 3 billion to my account." Alright. Chen Jizhong complied. He no longer cared about his cultivation and began to make calls. Jingmen Island, auction venue. Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wenong were chatting together. Suddenly, they noticed that Tan Xiu had left his seat and immediately looked at each other in dismay. Tan Xiao had just left his seat to make a phone call. After he came back, he began to participate in the auction of the Millennium Ginseng. Brother Miao, could it be that Tan Xiao wants to participate in the auction? Does he fancy that private island? Xiao Mingzhen's eyes flashed with a surprised expression as he asked in a low voice. Miao Wentong said in a low voice, "It's very likely." Look at his serious expression. I feel that this matter is most likely true. However, I really don't understand why he would run to the Pacific Ocean to buy a private island at such a young age. Could it be that he wants to move to that island and live a secluded life? Xiao Mingzhen said with a forced smile, I can't see through him. I really can't see through him. To be honest, Tan Xiao's age and appearance give me a strong contradictory feeling. I simply can't figure out how such a young man's words and actions don't have the slightest bit of a young man's attitude. On the contrary, he looks like a wise man with deep schemes. He's an evildoer, Miao Wentong said with certainty. Tan Xiao returned to his seat and quietly waited for the money to be transferred to his account. Although he could see the strange expression on Miao Wentong's and Xiao Mingzhen's faces, he didn't explain. If the Millennium Ginseng was something he really wanted, then this private island was something he must get. Even if he had to snatch it, he must get his hands on it. 510 million. The nouveau riche fat middle-aged man was the first to bid. 520 million. 550 million. In the last round of the auction, the number of people participating in the auction was relatively less compared to the previous rounds. But there were still more than a dozen people who were constantly increasing the price. Among them, the one who bid the most jubilant was the fat middle-aged man wearing the golden chain. After 7 or 8 minutes, the price had climbed to 1.48 billion. 1.5 billion. A trace of sweat appeared on the fat middle-aged man's forehead as he still shouted. 2 billion. Another old man, who was over 70 years old, raised the card in his hand and shouted. The fat middle-aged man suddenly turned his head. His eyes were brimming with anger as he stared at the old man. After gasping for a few times, he shouted again, 1 billion. At this price, only the old man and the fat middle-aged man were still bidding. The old man was expressionless, as if he turned a blind eye to the anger on the fat middle-aged man's face. He once again bid, 2 billion. 3 billion. The fat middle-aged man's voice was somewhat hoarse, but he still persisted. However, what made him turn angry was that the old man silently shook his head and no longer bid. Phew! The fat middle-aged man wiped the sweat on his forehead and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had actually reached his limit and would have to give up if he increased the price again. A smile appeared on the corner of the auctioneer's mouth. His eyes flickered as he smilingly said, the price of 9 Dragons Island has now climbed to 2.3 billion. It's indeed a terrifying number, but I think there should be some people who haven't bid yet. After all, a private island of tens of square kilometers has been developed and constructed. If it's properly utilized, it will definitely be a paradise on Earth, a kingdom of its own. There are no laws in the real world on 9 Dragons Island. Whoever owns the entire island will be the king of this land, the one with the most power. If the owner of 9 Dragons Island is willing, he can apply internationally to establish a new country. This place is a dream, a paradise. I want to ask, is there anyone else who wants to increase the price? Is there anyone else who wants to become the owner of 9 Dragons Island? The entire auction venue fell into a dead silence. Everyone was watching each other. They were incited by the auctioneer's words and their emotions had been completely stirred. Yet, they couldn't come up with so much liquid capital. Otherwise, it would have a very serious impact on their career, and it would be a huge blow to their foundation. They were tempted, but they were helpless. This was the truest portrayal of their hearts. A trace of disappointment was revealed on the auctioneer's beautiful face. Although the price of 2.3 billion had exceeded her expectation, she still hoped that this island could be sold at a higher price. On the contrary, the fat middle-aged man was the exact opposite. A smile appeared on his face, and he even looked a bit proud. His eyes swept over the last old man who bid against him, and then subconsciously glanced at Tan Xiao. 5 billion. Tan Xiu's voice echoed in the auction venue. In an instant, everyone in the entire auction venue revealed a strange expression. No one thought that Tan Xiu, who couldn't even buy a millennium ginseng, would unexpectedly bid for this private island. Moreover, he even bid a sky-high price. Did he have that much money? Where did he get such courage from? And who is he? Questions surged in everyone's heart. Miao Wenong, Xiao Mingjin, and even the sage-like Dao Master Zi, who was sitting next to Tan Xiu, were shocked by Tan Xiu's big move. They looked at Tan Xiu with disbelief. They didn't expect that Tan Xiu would actually be able to come up with so much money. Xiao Mingjin gently touched Miao Wenong and said in a low voice, "You advise him not to mess around here. The big boss behind this auction is very powerful. We absolutely can't afford to provoke him." Chapter 99. Miao Wentong's lips squirmed as he secretly sighed inside. Then he pulled Tan Xiu's sleeve and whispered, "Tan Xiu, this auction is not a joke. If you don't have enough money and lie about the price, not only will you get a huge compensation, but you'll also get a heavy blow from the auction house. The organizer of this Bauhinia auction, the big shot behind the scenes, has a very terrifying strength." Tan Xiu glanced at the short message displayed on his mobile screen. The corner of his mouth curved into an arc as he lightly smiled and said, "Don't do porcelain work if you don't have a diamond. Don't worry about it." Miao Wentong opened his mouth and finally gave up. He felt that Tan Xiu couldn't afford that much money. Even if Tan Xiu was very powerful, he was still too young. Even if his family was rich, it was impossible for him to mobilize too much money. In the front row, the smile and complacency on the fat middle-aged man's face froze in a flash. He turned his head with difficulty and directly jumped from his chair when he saw Tan Xiu, shouting, "Nonsense! He's deliberately making trouble. I don't believe he can afford 5 billion to buy an island." His words were approved by the majority of the people in the auction venue, and the sound of discussion resounded again. "Yeah. How old is he? He hasn't even grown his hair yet, right? How could he afford 5 billion to buy an island? This auction is not a joke. Doesn't he know the consequences of lying about the price? Young people nowadays, they're really unreliable. Buying 9 Dragons Island isn't for 250,000, nor 5 million. That's 5 billion. There are so many people here, and I'm afraid 4/5 of their personal assets won't even reach this amount. Did this brat's head get kicked by a donkey? That fat man snatched the millennium-old ginseng from his hand before, yet he actually harbors a grudge and deliberately raised the price now. Can't he see that the fat man has reached his limit and can't increase the price anymore? What a stupid guy. I really don't know what he's thinking. He's actually playing such a big joke for the sake of fighting back. If that fat man doesn't increase the price anymore, he'll probably be in a difficult position. Idiot! Tan Xiu's hearing was sharp, and he could clearly hear the discussions around him. However, he did not explain, but the smile on his face slowly faded. At this moment, the auctioneer Xiao Ai's heart was filled with worry. She knew that if Tan Xiu obtained the right to purchase 9 Dragons Island in the end, but he couldn't come up with that much money, the auction would be considered a failure. Not only would she not receive any commission, but her status in the auction would also plummet. But she was also aware of one thing. During the auction, she had no right to inquire about the amount of funds Tan Xiu had. What to do? The auctioneer, Xiao Ai, looked at the fat middle-aged man with a headache and then looked at Tan Xiu. The fat middle-aged man glared at Tan Xiu and shouted again, "Auctioneer, I suggest that brat show his proof of funds. Otherwise, not only will your auction house's reputation be tarnished, but it will also disappoint the guests who come to your auction house." The auctioneer shot a deep look at Tan Xiu and finally helplessly said to the fat middle-aged man, "I'm really sorry, sir. I don't have the right to do that." Tan Xiu didn't even look at the fat middle-aged man and instead spoke to the auctioneer. "I'd like to ask you something. Someone caused trouble in the auction. What measures will your auction house take? For example, a certain fat man who can't afford to lose and is desperate to do something. You're courting death, brat. The fat middle-aged man was burning with anger as he glared at Tan Xiao and roared. The auctioneer, Xiao Ai, cursed inwardly. She quickly stepped forward a few steps and said aloud, "Sir, regardless of whether he can afford it or not, he has already bid and our auction house will trade with him. Also, since he has bid, the rest is between our auction house and him. You have no right to interfere. Please sit down, we'll continue the auction. I'd like to ask if you still want to increase the price?" The fat middle-aged man's face turned red. He was full of anger but had nowhere to vent it. Although he had a bit of background and strength, he didn't dare to go against this auction house. With no other choice, he could only swallow his anger and sit in silence. The auctioneer, Xiao Ai, felt relieved inwardly. She was a bit disappointed to see that the fat middle-aged man didn't bid again, but she still said, "The current bidding price of 9 Dragons Island is 2.5 billion. Is there a higher price? If not, this 9 Dragons Island will belong to that handsome gentleman later." No one spoke. All eyes were on Tan Xiao, waiting for the result. "I hereby announce that the owner of 9 Dragons Island is this handsome gentleman. Please take your ID and follow me to the backstage to handle the transaction procedures." The auctioneer, Xiao Ai, stared fixedly at Tan Xiao and spoke with a face full of expectation. Tan Xiao got up and walked toward the backstage of the auction venue. The fat middle-aged man also abruptly got up. He glared at Tan Xiao with resentment and shouted, "Hey guys, don't go yet. Let's go and have a look. I want to see if a brat who hasn't even grown his hair can take out 2.5 billion. Yeah. Let's go and have a look. All right. Let's see the result. All right. Let's go." No one chose to leave and instead swarmed toward the backstage. They wanted to know if Tan Xiao could take out so much money. If he could, they also wanted to witness this sky-high transaction. Miao Weneng and Xiao Mingjun smiled wryly as they followed the crowd toward the backstage. If it was 1.8 billion, the two of them could pool the money and help Tan Xiao pay in advance. But it was a huge sum of 2.5 billion. It would be very difficult for the two of them to take out such a huge sum. At the backstage of the auction venue, the steward already knew the cause and effect of the matter. His eyes swept over the crowd and finally landed on Tan Xiao. He then said with a smile, "Congratulations, Mr. Tang." Tan Xiao nodded. He handed over his bank card and said, "All right, transfer the money." The steward took the bank card and called his assistants to quickly handle the transfer. After 2.5 billion was transferred, he immediately asked his assistants to help Tan Xiao with the transaction procedures, filling in the purchase contract, and other matters. Really? Can he really afford it? The fat middle-aged man was dumbfounded. Those people who previously ridiculed Tan Xiao in private were also dumbfounded. They stared blankly at Tan Xiao as he quickly handled the various procedures under the guidance of the staff. They looked at each other in dismay as an awkward expression appeared on their faces. What was slapping the face? Tonight's auction was slapping the face. The fat middle-aged man was so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to drill into. Those people also felt as if a pair of invisible palms were ruthlessly slapping their faces. Even Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjun were secretly flabbergasted and endlessly ashamed. The Chinese Redbud auction came to a successful end. After Tan Xiao had handled the various procedures, a large number of guests came to greet him. These people's status and background in the country were very strong. Even if Tan Xiao's EQ was very poor, he still didn't want to easily offend them. After reluctantly dealing with them, he immediately left with Miao Wentong, Xiao Mingjun, and Dao Master Z. Half an hour later, in the presidential suite on the top floor of the Jarvis Hotel, Tan Xiao returned the 80 million yuan he borrowed from Jia Ruidao. He also called Chen Zhizhong's bank account and transferred the remaining 500 million yuan to him. Therefore, Tan Xiao's account still had 90 million yuan left. 2.5 billion yuan in debt. After dealing with these matters, Tan Xiao couldn't help but smack his lips. As the saying goes, lice are not afraid of being bitten, debts are not enough to worry about. But this sentence was very inappropriate for Tan Xiao. He was a person who could clearly distinguish between kindness and grudges, as well as public and private affairs. Although Chen Zhizhong was his registered disciple, personal affection didn't mean that they shared private property. That money also didn't mean that Chen Zhizhong was filial to him. I must speed up the speed of making money. Tan Xiu went to the window and looked at the starry night sky. His mind was filled with all kinds of thoughts. After a long time, he remembered something. He left the suite and knocked on the door of the presidential suite next door. In the next suite, Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin didn't directly go to rest. They were in the brightly lit living room, smoking and chatting. Brother Xiao, I'm very interested in Tan Xiu's identity now. But the more I investigate, the more mysterious he is. Mysterious to an unbelievable degree. Miao Wentong puffed out a smoke ring and faintly said. Xiao Mingjin forced a smile and said, You're not the only one who has this feeling. I also feel the same. According to the information I got, Tan Xiu comes from an ordinary family. He belongs to a single-parent family, and he doesn't have any big background. What I can't believe the most is that he had a car accident, causing him to be muddle-headed for a year. According to the investigation information, he was like a fool that year. But how can a fool do such sensational things? Miao Wentong nodded and said, His life background is as simple as a piece of white paper. Even if some color has been added recently, it's only recently that he has some relationship with the Long family in Star City. What I want to know the most is his master's background. But according to the investigation information, there are no clues at all. Xiao Mingjin nodded and sighed, Yes. He also wants to know who his master is. He wanted to know which terrifying big shot was able to train such a powerful young talent. And tonight, he had spent a total of 2.56 billion. This amount is a huge sum of money for us, but he can easily get it. I'm also very curious about the source of this money. Miao Wentong's expression moved as he asked, How about I ask someone to check it? I should be able to find the source of the money. Xiao Mingjin shook his head seriously, Don't. For Tan Xiu to be able to get so much money, it shows that there's definitely a powerful figure behind him that we don't know. In case we send someone to investigate him, I'm afraid he'll be very angry. I'm afraid the little friendship we have with him will be broken. Alas. It's true. Miao Wentong sighed helplessly. Xiao Mingjin slowly said, Let's not delve into the matter of Tan Xiu's identity. The most important thing now is that we're clear about one thing. The advantages of having a good relationship with him outweigh the disadvantages. Tomorrow's trip to the Evil Dragon Sea area will be a good opportunity for us to fight side by side. We must seize this opportunity. It's also a good opportunity to get rich. Miao Wentong grinned upon hearing it. Chapter 100. Knock, knock. The sound of knocking on the door interrupted their conversation. Both of them looked at each other and looked suspicious. They didn't know who would knock on the door so late at night. Tan Xiu, you haven't slept yet? Miao Wentong opened the door and was surprised to see Tan Xiu standing outside. Tan Xiu said, There's something I want to ask you. Come in and talk. Miao Wentong said with a smile. Quickly, Tan Xiu sat in front of Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin and said, Two gentlemen, can you tell me your identity? After all, we're going to the Evil Dragon Sea area tomorrow and we need to fight side by side. But I know nothing about you. Miao Wentong said with a smile, I'm Haiqing's Miao family's patriarch and also the Miao group CEO. My master is Taoist and Hui. He passed away more than 10 years ago. I'm a rogue cultivator. Xiao Mingjin said, I'm just an idle person who started a venture capital company. I was originally a martial artist. Later, I accidentally obtained half of an ancient cultivation manual and then embarked on the path of cultivation. Tan Xiu nodded and said, I'm a student and I'm about to take the college entrance test. Stepping on the path of cultivation is very complicated, so I'll tell you later. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's words, the two of them were a bit disappointed in their hearts. However, the two of them were smart people, so they didn't get to the bottom of it. Tan Xiu said the purpose of disturbing them and humbly asked, Both of you are people who have been in the society for many years, and your identity is very unusual. So, I want to ask you too, how about managing a private island? The two of them looked at each other in dismay. Although their identity was unusual, they didn't own a private island. How would they know how to manage it? Tan Xiu was surprised and said, "Both of you don't know?" Miao went on, coughed a few times and said with a forced smile, "We really don't know. But I think it shouldn't be difficult to manage a private island. Nowadays, it's easy to get things done with money. You can hire a professional butler with a lot of money and let him take care of everything on the private island." Butler? Tan Xiu slapped his forehead and sighed inwardly. He had been smart all his life, but he had been muddle-headed this time. When he was in the immortal world, he had a very good butler who followed him for more than 6,000 years. The butler was usually the one who took care of his personal matters in his domain. However, this candidate, Tan Xiu, had a headache. It was right to hire a housekeeper, but where could he find a loyal and capable housekeeper? And he had to stay on an isolated island in the Pacific Ocean? Miao Wenong looked at Tan Xiu's expression and understood Tan Xiu's thoughts. He asked tentatively, "How about I help you find one? An English butler is the best. As long as you have enough money, you can definitely hire the most famous butler in the world." Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "Forget it. Let's talk about this later." The next day, a cargo ship anchored at Jingmen Island's port anchored and set sail. This cargo ship was obtained by Miao Wenong. He had some connections in Jingmen Island and could use it to transport fierce beast carcasses. On the cargo ship, apart from several crew members and 2 chefs, there were only Tan Xiu's group of 4. The blue sea was clear and the cool breeze was blowing gently. Tan Xiu came to the stern alone. He sat cross-legged on the deck and silently cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. Even though it was daytime, he could still absorb a trace of starlight. In his body, the 9 stars quietly floated, releasing resplendent rays of light, absorbing the surging star energy. Tan Xiu's expression suddenly moved while he was cultivating. He found that the star force he absorbed didn't come with the power of flames. But today, the sun was shining brightly. Many of the star force he absorbed came from the sun, and there was a trace of scorching heat in it. Heaven and earth are divided into yin and yang, and the universe is divided into 2 poles. Yin and yang fuse together to create perfection. Just as this thought emerged in Tan Xiu's mind, the star force he absorbed into his body began to crazily churn like boiling water. The 9 stars changed as the yin and yang pattern arranged themselves into a formation, causing the boiling star force to undergo a qualitative change. The fog-like star force was swallowed by the 9 stars at the same time as a gray airflow spurted out. This airflow was easily controlled by Tan Xiu. After it was channeled into his meridians, it began to surge crazily according to the circulation route of the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. Hiss! Tan Xiu's body violently trembled as a heart-wrenching pain gushed out from his meridians. His meridians were like thin pieces of paper that were easily torn apart. Then the gray airflow filled, nourished, and repaired them. As more and more gray airflow poured in, his meridians that had just been repaired began to swell, tear, and then be repaired again. Again and again. It was an endless cycle. Tan Xiu forgot about the time and everything in the world. He had suffered countless pain before, but he dared to swear that he had never encountered such terrible pain. At first, the pain only came from his meridians and flesh, but as time passed, the pain seemed to be everywhere. Even in the deepest part of his soul, there was an indescribable pain. In the depths of the vast universe, tens of thousands of stars vibrated at the same time. Even those previously dim and lusterless stars formed a halo on the surface. Moreover, the forming force outside the halo was like a large net that spread rapidly toward the direction of Earth. Layers upon layers, innumerable. Boom! The radiant sun at this moment shone brightly on Earth, and the temperature also increased by more than 10 degrees in just 7 or 8 breaths. What's going on? What happened? In every corner of Earth, hundreds of millions of people raised their heads to look at the sky, revealing a puzzled look. In the South China Sea, on the cargo ship that Tan Xiu was on, all the crew members and chefs revealed a confused look. The rolling heat wave caused thick sweat to appear on their bodies. Moreover, They could clearly feel that the surrounding temperature was getting higher and higher. It's going to be so hot that I'll die. Too weird. What happened? The thermometer shows that it's already 37 degrees. Damn, the temperature is still rising, 38 degrees. 39 degrees, what the hell is going on? Is it the end of the world? The temperature has risen to 40 degrees. What should we do? Do we continue to sail to the deep sea? Wait. In the cargo ship's cabin, Dao Master Z, Miao Wending, and Xiao Mingjin gathered together and quickly rushed out of the cabin. When their figures appeared on the deck, they looked up at the sun in the blue sky and suddenly revealed a horrified look. This was the first time they saw such a big sun, and it was the first time they felt the abnormality of the sun. Like a torrential wave of heat falling from the sky, the temperature of the air above the sea was getting higher and higher. Spiritual energy fluctuation? Suddenly, the three people's complexion changed. They were all cultivators, so they could keenly sense the spirit qi in the air surging towards the stern of the ship. They could also sense a huge amount of spirit qi churning at the stern of the ship. "Let's go!" Miao Wentong shouted. His figure was as fast as lightning as he instantly rushed toward the stern. However, when the three people sprinted to the stern deck, their eyes burst with disbelief. Three pairs of eyes were firmly locked on Tan Xiu. It's him? Miao Wentong's lips squirmed as he looked at Tan Xiu as if he had seen a ghost. If it was someone else, perhaps he could reluctantly accept it. But the person who created this heaven and earth anomaly turned out to be Tan Xiu. Even if he saw it with his own eyes, he still couldn't accept it. Xiao Mingjin's body trembled as he raised his trembling arm with difficulty. He pointed at Tan Xiu and involuntarily said, How did he do it? This scene is too terrifying, right? The temperature is still rising. This temperature, not good. We can withstand this temperature, but the crew on the ship can't bear it. Miao Wentong was like waking up from a dream. His complexion paled as he rushed toward Tan Xiu to stop him. Don't! Dao Master Z's eyes flashed as he instantly blocked in front of Miao Wentong and whispered, Don't disturb him. To him, this might be a great opportunity. Let's send the crew out first and then come back. Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin quickly exchanged glances and tacitly nodded. They then used their movement technique to quickly rush into the cabin. After they asked if there was a spare boat on the ship, they immediately took the crew and the chef to board the boat and sailed toward the distance. Half an hour later, with the help of the lifebuoy, the three of them returned to the cargo ship. Dao Master Z, what should we do next? The temperature dozens of nautical miles away is not as high as here, but it's still close to 40 degrees. And the temperature here is at least 50 degrees. If this continues, I'm afraid even the three of us won't be able to bear it. Miao Wenong stood on the top of the ship more than 20 meters away from Tan Xiu as he spoke with a wry smile. Cultivate. A strange expression appeared on Dao Master Z's face as his finger streaked across the void in front of him. Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin frowned at the same time. Cultivate? At this time? Cultivate here? Are you kidding me? Dao Master Z sat cross-legged and whispered, What are you doing? Don't tell me you want to give up such a good opportunity to cultivate? The temperature here is very high, but it's still bearable for us. Both of you are experts who have been cultivating for decades. Don't tell me you can't sense the concentration of spiritual qi in the air? Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin's body shook as a look of ecstasy appeared on their faces. That's right. They indeed felt the rich spiritual qi in the air. Even the concentration of spiritual qi here was more than 10 times richer than other places. Cultivating under such conditions was many times faster than their usual cultivation speed. Cultivate. The two of them immediately sat cross-legged and began to cultivate. They didn't want to miss this God-given opportunity. Both of them were cultivation geniuses. They had benefited a lot from the 1,000 revolution array. They had long wanted to calm down and cultivate well, striving to break through another realm. Chapter 101. Imperial Capital. The skyscrapers were like giants stepping on the earth, with the blue sky above their heads. In one of the buildings, Andy pushed open the door of an office in her high heels. She was only 1.58 meters tall, but she looked like a doll, delicate and cute. The twin peaks in front of her chest were majestic and spectacular. Childish face. Atsundra lowly. Andy came to the desk with a folder in his arms. He knocked on the desk and said, "Boss, the test results are out." Behind the desk, Kang Xia suddenly got up and took the folder from Andy while asking in a deep voice, "What's the result?" Andy said, "There are no harmful substances. It has very strong Chinese medicine ingredients." "Really?" Kang Xia's face lit up and she quickly opened the folder. Andy sat down on the chair in front of the desk and giggled, "Of course it's true. It was clearly stated on the inspection report. In addition, according to your instructions, I have already registered the company at the Bureau of Industry and Commerce." The legal representative was Tan Xiu. "As for the shares, you'll need to sign it in private." Kang Xia's eyes gleamed with wisdom. After reading the document, she said in a deep voice, "We can withdraw from here. The new company's HQ will be set up in Star City. Our preliminary work is to recruit researchers in the field of cosmetics, rent the factory, register the trademark, and package the two products. Within 2 months, the company must be set up and all the preliminary work must be ready." "Okay." Andy made a no problem gesture and said with a sweet smile, "After resting for a few months, we can start working again. I think Jack and Cruz will be jumping for joy, praising God and praising our future big boss." With excitement and fighting spirit, Kang Xia replied, "Big boss is very interesting, very interesting. Except for the moment when I stepped into the workplace, I was very excited and full of fighting spirit. Since then, he had never felt this way again. At this moment, this feeling has returned." Andy was very curious about the man who was going to be her boss. Looking at Kang Xia's fighting spirit, she curiously asked, "Boss, shouldn't you contact the boss? It seems that you haven't given him a definite answer yet, have you?" Kang Xia's expression froze. She then took out her mobile and smilingly said, "I forgot about this. Contact him now." After a while, a bit of anger was revealed on Kang Xia's face as she threw the mobile phone on the desk and said, "The call can't be connected. I'll contact him again tonight. Get ready to finish everything we have to do in the imperial capital as soon as possible. We'll rush to Star City in 2 days." "Okay." Andy jumped up from his chair and dashed out of the room. In the South Sea, the cargo ship, which had already stopped sailing, was shrouded in torrential heat waves. Within a radius of dozens of kilometers, a large number of fish fled in all directions. At this moment, Tan Xiu's mind was completely clear as he continuously cultivated according to the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. Although the 9 stars were motionless, they were constantly absorbing the spirit chi from all directions and the power of the stars surging in from the universe. Absorb. Transfer the message. Tang Xiu named the gray substance that was eventually formed as star force. Star power was like the true essence cultivated by cultivators and the immortal essence cultivated by immortal cultivators. It was the foundation of a cultivator, the source of energy. In Tan Xiu's meridians, the surging star power expanded the width of his meridians and tempered their toughness. The process was painful, but the result made Tan Xiu feel happy. More than 10 meters away from Tan Xiu on the top of the ship, Dao Master Z, Miao Wending, and Xiao Mingjun were also sitting cross-legged in cultivation, desperately absorbing the spirit qi from all directions. Although their absorption speed was very fast, it was simply a drop in the bucket compared to the rich spirit qi all around. It was not worth mentioning. Pop. Miao Wenong was the first to open his eyes. His eyes were filled with an intense pleasant surprise as he looked at Tan Xiu with a grateful expression. He had a breakthrough. He had been stuck at the previous stage for nearly 2 years. In these 2 years, no matter how hard he cultivated, he was always unable to break through. Even the legendary heavenly abode probably can't compare to the spirit qi concentration here, right? Miao Wentong's heart was filled with satisfaction as he secretly praised. Half an hour later, Xiao Mingjun also woke up from his cultivation. Because of the breakthrough in his cultivation, he was also filled with ecstasy. He was also deeply grateful to Tan Xiu. You also broke through? Miao Wentong's expression moved as he asked in a low voice. Xiao Mingjin was surprised. Don't tell me you also. Miao Wentong heavily nodded and said, cultivating in an environment with rich spirit qi is indeed twice the result with half the effort. After being stuck for 2 years, I've finally broken through. Xiao Mingjin turned his head to look at Tan Xiu and said with a smile, we owe Tan Xiu a big favor. If it weren't for him, we simply don't know when we would have broken through. Yeah. Miao Wentong agreed. I originally thought that I would need at least a few years to break through. I didn't expect that I would break through now. Soon, Dao Master Z also woke up from his cultivation. With a grateful expression in his eyes, he swept over Tan Xiu and finally landed on Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin. He then said with a smile, congratulations to the 2 benefactors. Miao Wentong said with a smile, it should be the same. Dao Master Z said with a smile, that's right. If it weren't for Benefactor Tang, I'm afraid this poor Taoist wouldn't have been able to break through in such a short time. But I really don't understand what kind of cultivation technique Benefactor Tang is practicing to actually create such a big scene. In the evening, the sun set in the west, and the sunset glow reflected the western sky and sea. The scorching heat of the day also gradually receded. Tan Xiu's eyelashes fluttered as he woke up from his cultivation. You guys, seeing the 3 people nearby, Tan Xiu suddenly revealed a confused expression. Miao Wentong's figure flashed and appeared in front of Tan Xiu. With a bright smile on his face, he said, we've already finished our cultivation and we're waiting for you to wake up from it. I originally thought that you would need a few more days to finish your cultivation, but I didn't expect that you'd finish it now. Tan Xiu got up and said, my mind was enlightened, so I took a long time to cultivate. Have we arrived at the Evil Dragon Sea area? No. Miao Wentong forced a smile and shook his head. How long have I been cultivating? Tan Xiu asked with a puzzled expression. It's already evening now, why haven't we arrived at the Evil Dragon Sea area? Didn't you say that it's only 1,000 nautical miles? Pointing to the sea, Miao Wentong was at a loss whether he had to laugh or cry as he said, haven't you noticed that the cargo ship has stopped? If you don't finish, the 3 of us are going to send some things to the sailors dozens of nautical miles away. What's going on? Tan Xiu didn't know that he was cultivating, so he curiously asked. After a while, listening to Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin's description, Tan Xiu was tongue-tied and was overwhelmed with emotions. Even in his dreams, he had never thought that he would create such a big heaven and earth phenomenon. That's right. My cultivation. Tan Xiu immediately calmed down and observed the situation inside his body. The 9 stars had become much more lustrous than before. The lustrous rays of light illuminated the space inside his dantian. Around the 9 stars, a large amount of gray star force surged, connecting every unblocked meridian in his body. Moreover, his bones, tendons, organs, and muscles were all quenched. Whether it was flexibility or strength, all had a qualitative leap. It was as if every part of his body was full of explosive power. As a supreme immortal in the immortal world, his perception of power was particularly accurate. He could feel the degree of his current strength with a light wave of his fist. 3,000 jin. He nodded his head in satisfaction. 6,000 pounds of strength was double his previous strength. Originally, he had to reach the peak of the skin strengthening stage to have 3,000 jin of power. Now, he had not yet broken through the skin strengthening stage, but he already had a powerful strength. If I reach the peak of the skin strengthening stage, how much will my strength increase? Tan Xiu was secretly looking forward to it. An hour later, the 4 of them used the GPS device to find the starving crew and the chef, and brought them back to the cargo ship. Regarding today's phenomenon, the 4 of them didn't explain. They just told them that after this matter was over, they would double their reward. The next evening, the cargo ship rushed to the Evil Dragon Sea area and found the small channel in the middle of the 3 islands. However, because it was already late, they didn't immediately look for the fierce beasts. Instead, they ate and drank to their heart's content to conserve their energy and wait until tomorrow morning to act. The shadow of the moon danced as a chill came. Tan Xiu stood on the bow deck, overlooking the islands not far away. Deep in his heart, there was a sense of crisis. This sense of crisis was unclear, but it really existed. He felt that there were terrifying, fierce beasts on the three islands. Those fierce beasts were absolutely not something he could provoke right now. Moreover, others might not be able to sense it, but he could feel that the death qi in the vicinity was much stronger than other places. It indicated that a lot of humans or beasts had died here. Immeasurable Tianzuan. Does Benefactor Tang want to go to the islands to have a look? Dao Master Z silently appeared at Tang Xiu's side as he said with a smile. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "If I wait for a few years, maybe I'll go to these three islands. But now, I don't want to go, and I don't dare to go." "Why do you say that?" Dao Master Z was confused. Tan Xiu indifferently said, "These three islands are naturally formed feng shui great array. This array formation is ingenious and incomparably mysterious. If someone were to land on the island, it would be fine in the periphery. But once they go deeper, I'm afraid they won't be able to return." "Is that true?" Dao Master Z originally wanted to land on the island to hunt. But when he heard Tan Xiu's words, he suddenly felt a sense of crisis. After all, Tan Xiu was able to break through the 6th layer of the 1000 Revolution Array. His attainments in arrays were absolutely terrifying. If what he said was true, then they really couldn't go deeper into these three islands. "Really?" Tan Xiu calmly said. Dao Master Z was silent for a long time before he forced a smile and said, "If that's the case, then we can only move around the periphery." In fact, this poor Taoist learned from the ancient books that the fierce beasts on these three islands are much higher than those in the channel. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.